Chapter 1881. Yuan Feng didn't mind Zhi Qiping's words. He turned to look at the other two cultivators and smiled. I believe Elder Man and Elder Hu also understand what's going on, right? Elder Man's name was Man Yun. He was a cultivator with a long upper body and long arms. There were also white spots on his face. When he heard Yuan Feng's question, he didn't say anything. Instead, he turned to look at the other red-faced old woman. She was the other elder of the spirit husbandry sect, Hu Yu. Hu Yu opened her eyes, and a cold light flashed through them. She stared at Yuan Feng with her small black pupils and screamed like an owl. Elder Yuan! We know that you are the leader of this operation, and the sect master has instructed us to prioritize the sect. However, you don't have to show off, right? Even if we didn't know about it before, since we are sitting here now, we have already checked the records. My spirit husbandry sect was at its peak tens of thousands of years ago, but for some unknown reason, the sect master and elders disappeared overnight. Since then, the spirit husbandry sect has been unable to recover, and it has been difficult for us to move forward among the cultivation sects in the Dawn Rain continent. Could this 5 Skanda spirit awakening formation be related to the missing seniors? What Elder Hu said is right. Yuan Feng clapped and smiled. I am obsessed with the Tao of formations. After searching through the records of my spirit husbandry sect, I finally found an incomplete 5 Skanda spirit awakening formation in an old jade pendant. Moreover, from this formation, I obtained some vague information. The disappearance of my thunder-controlling sect seniors should be related to the formation, and it should be related to the Chao's soul essence in the Flame Forest Mountains Lake of Fire. I even found the vague location of the 5 Skanda spirit awakening formation in the jade pendant. Man Yun, who hadn't spoken for a long time, snorted. Needless to say, my spirit husbandry sect seniors died here. I believe Elder Yuan thinks that we have lived for too long and wants us to follow in their footsteps. Elder Man, although I have lived for 700 years, I still haven't lived enough. I still want to live for 2,000 years. Yuan Feng didn't find it strange and said with a smile. Nascent soul? Man Yun, Zhi Qiping, and Hu Yu were all shocked. They looked at each other, and their gazes were filled with confusion. Why do you say that? Hu Yu continued. Could it be that Elder Yuan has some secret method? Ha ha ha, Yuan Feng laughed loudly. He stroked his beard and said, Of course there is. Otherwise, why would I be willing to ask the sect master to make such a big move? Not only had they searched for the location of the 5 Essences Awakening formation more than 10 years ago, they had also sent out many disciples to deceive others. It is only now that I am confident that I dare to reveal this secret method to everyone. Elder Yuan. Zhi Qiping smiled and said, Of course, there is a way, but since it can even annihilate a nascent soul cultivator, how can late gold core cultivators like us provoke it? I still have a lifespan left, waiting for the final moment to form my nascent soul. Elder Zhe, there's no need to lie in front of an immortal. The 4 of us are all in the late stage of the gold core realm and have a lifespan of about 700 years. If we can reach the nascent soul realm, why would I take such a big risk? Yuan Feng was still smiling and said, Even if something happened here tens of thousands of years ago, it doesn't mean that it will happen again tens of thousands of years later. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and took out several jade slips, which flew in front of the 3 of them. Everyone, please take a look. This is the mental cultivation method that I have finally found after decades of searching. Yuan Feng seemed to say casually. Everyone took it and immersed their divine senses in it. However, in just a moment, the 3 of them suddenly raised their heads, their eyes flashing with disbelief. Hu Yu actually exclaimed, Spirit-devouring mental cultivation method? Wasn't this lost long ago? Even beast cultivators don't necessarily have this mental cultivation method. I understand now. Zhi Qiping slapped his forehead and looked like he had suddenly realized something. Elder Yuan went out to train 100 years ago. I'm afraid it was for this, right? That's right. I'm grateful that Elder Zhe still remembers the past. Yuan Feng nodded and said, The heavens didn't let me down. I finally found this in a small beast cultivator family in Hun country. Sigh, but it's a pity. This mental cultivation method. Shi Qiping was stunned and immediately immersed his divine senses in the jade slips. Sure enough, in the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the three of them looked a little pale. They raised their heads and smiled bitterly. Elder Yuan, aren't you teasing us? This incomplete mental cultivation method can't be used at all. Everyone? If it can't be used, why would I waste so much effort? Yuan Feng said with a smile. The three of them looked at each other, as if they didn't quite understand. Just as the impatient Hu Yu was about to ask, Shi Qiping suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said in surprise, "Could it be? Elder Yuan is talking about spirit beasts?" Great! Yuan Feng clapped his hands and said, "Elder Zhe finally understands." Hu Yu immediately shook his head and said, "But although the spirit beasts of us jelly spirit sect golden core cultivators are different from the spirit beasts of beast cultivators, they still have a mental connection with the cultivators. Such a dangerous mental cultivation method. If there's an accident, our cultivation will also be damaged." Man Yun frowned and sent his divine senses into the jade slips again. He closed his eyes for a moment and said, "In my opinion, Elder Yuan's idea is quite feasible." "Elder Man, please speak." Hu Yu hurriedly asked again. "Elder Hu, please take a look. This spirit-devouring mental cultivation method lacks a way to erase the spirit imprint in the spirit essence. This thing is basically the complete mental cultivation method, so we don't need it. But without this step, we can't recklessly devour the spirit essence of ancient beasts. That will only cause our fragile souls to be destroyed directly and turn us into idiots. However, if our spirit beasts devour the spirit essence with the spirit imprint, the spirit beast's spirit will naturally erase the imprint in the spirit essence, and even devour it. When the spirit beast's strength increases, we will naturally benefit. Especially since the spirit essence can directly raise the spirit beast's grade, our cultivation will naturally rise as well. Moreover, if the four of us use the spirit-devouring mental cultivation method at the same time to devour the spirit essence of a Chao Wu and give it to 4 spirit beasts, the chances of success are quite high." Hu Yu also realized and said with a smile, "The Chao Wu is a ferocious beast after all. I don't know if we can bear it." Shi Qiping said with some worry. "Isn't that simple?" Man Yun said with a smile. "You just have to use the mental cultivation method and extract the spirit essence bit by bit. Everyone, don't forget, we still have the 5 skandhas spiritual awakening formation." Yuan Feng pointed at his feet in the distance and said with a smile, "Let's first gather the strength of all the disciples to activate the formation and release the Chao Wu's spirit essence under the formation. After using the formation to weaken its spirit essence, we can then use the mental cultivation method. How can it not succeed?" -8. Chapter 1882. That's right. Although an ant is small, it can still bite an elephant. Hu Yu squinted his eyes and looked at the disciples on the altar. He smiled and said, "After the formation is set up, we'll roughly impart the mental cultivation method to them and let their spiritual beasts absorb some of the essence. Then, we won't have to worry about the ferocity of the Chao Chi's essence." "That's right." Yuan Feng clapped his hands again. "The sect leader also thinks highly of this, which is why he asked me to do this. However, this 5 essences awakening formation, what does it have to do with the Chao Chi beasts?" "Elder Yuan actually found quite a few Chao Chi beasts?" Man Yun asked again. I don't know how to use it either. However, there's an incomplete sentence on the jade pendant, so I can only prepare for it." Yuan Feng smiled bitterly. "However, Chao Chi beasts are hard to find. The ones that my Spirit Crane sect disciples found are all underage. I don't know if they can be used. Tsk, Chao Chi beasts are second-class spiritual beasts. Once they mature, they have the strength of an early-stage foundation establishment realm cultivator. How can Chi refinement disciples find adult Chao Chi beasts?" Hu Yu smiled. Yuan Feng waved his hand. "This thing isn't important, so I'm not afraid of others knowing about it. If they can find it, then they can find it. If they can't, then they can't. If it was important, I would have informed you long ago. The three of them did not comment. Elders, let's take a look at the mental cultivation methods first. Although these mental cultivation methods are incomplete, there are still some mysteries within them. I only managed to gain some understanding after looking at them for a long time. Right now, I want to spar with all of you and study them properly. Yuan Feng sat down and said, If this mission is effective, we'll remember Elder Yuan's kindness. Hu Yu looked at the other two elders and said sincerely, Us too. Chi Chiping and Man Ye nodded. I am already satisfied with the three elders' intentions. Yuan Feng smiled. The four of us have been in the Spirit Crane sect for hundreds of years. We've been in high spirits when we were young. We've fought for power and cultivation, and we've also been suspicious of each other. Unfortunately, I've only realized now that everything is meaningless. Only the great Tao is above us. Elder Yuan is right. Man Ye nodded and said, Although I've known this for a long time, who can pursue the great Tao with peace of mind? Spirit stones, cultivation techniques, and even the soul essence in front of me. Chi Chiping smiled and said, All right, now that everything has been said, the Spirit Husbandry sect will still need us to support it together in the future. With this soul essence, the strength of the Spirit Husbandry sect will definitely increase greatly. In the future, we will still have to work together like today. Indeed, it's better to comprehend the mental cultivation method. Yuan Feng took out the jade slip and said, I'll tell you what I've comprehended. Above the altar, in a corner, Qian Yeming was also holding a small jade slip. Below him, there were only a few aura refining disciples repairing the formation. Looking at the extremely small part of the formation in the jade slip and comparing it with the completed part below him, his heart was filled with an indescribable feeling. He was still inferior to Miao Jun. After obtaining some information from the sect, he immediately ran around, wanting to obtain some benefits from the fire ape and the flame forest swamp. Unfortunately, in the end, he realized that he was only a chess piece of the sect. Everything he did was to confuse the public. It was impossible for him to have any relationship with the fire ape. The only thing he could do was listen to the elders' arrangements and repair the formation. Forget it, it's better not to be wishful thinking. Qian Yeming smiled bitterly and thought to himself, That disciple called Xiaohua from the Imperial Thunder sect is really wise. He didn't come to the Flame Forest Swamp at all. A disciple with such a temperament. It's normal for him to have such a shocking cultivation. Then, the scene of Xiaohua displaying his divine ability appeared in his mind again. A chill rose from the bottom of his heart, causing him to involuntarily shrink his neck. Unfortunately, how could Xiaohua be someone he could guess? At this moment, Xiaohua was standing respectfully on the mountain peak with Jinyi, welcoming the dozen or so cultivators who had just arrived. These dozen or so cultivators all had different appearances and cultivations. The ones at the front were early gold core cultivators. Behind these cultivators were their respective disciples. Their cultivations weren't weak, at least early foundation establishment. Fellow Taoist Jinyi, when I received your message, I immediately put aside my chores and rushed over. I hope I'm not too late. A short, wretched-looking old man with a sallow face cupped his hands and smiled. He was Lu Mingxing, an early gold core cultivator from the Rinsing Flower sect. Behind him were two disciples, one at the early foundation establishment stage and the other at the middle foundation establishment stage. Juniors Li Fengzhu and Shi Xian greet Marshal Uncle Jin. The two disciples from the Rinsing Flower sect also hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. Forget it. Jinyi flicked his sleeve and said, Marshal nephews, it's only been a few years since I last saw you, but you've actually improved so quickly. At that time, this old man's disciples blushed with shame. Li Fengzhu and Shi Xian glanced at Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian. They felt a bit strange, but since Xingyi didn't introduce them, they naturally didn't ask. Next to Lu Mingxing was an extremely tall old man. He was also incomparably skinny, standing there like a bamboo pole. He could be compared to Xiaohua. This old man was Jiang Zhuqing from the Xianyan school. He also cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist Jin, although this old man received your message first, but, I had to take care of some matters in the sect. Moreover, I had to be careful when working together with fellow Taoists from the Imperial Thunder sect, so I was a bit late." Jinyi waved his hand and said, conflicts between sects naturally have to be dealt with between sections. That's official business. Today's visit to Flame Forest Swamp is purely for personal relations. If fellow Taoist Jiang didn't participate, I'm afraid this matter would be even more difficult. At this moment, the two disciples behind Jiang Zhuqing also stepped forward and bowed. Juniors Jianming and Qianhan greet Marshal Uncle Jin. Rise. Jinyi smiled and waved his sleeve. Then, Jinyi turned to another early Golden Core State female cultivator and said with a smile, "Although I didn't send a message to Fairy Feng, in my opinion, since fellow Taoist Jiang is here, Feng Shuqing from the Huangdao sect can't be far away." This female cultivator was Fairy Feng Shuqing from the Huangdao sect. However, Feng Shuqing didn't have any methods to maintain her youth. Her face was wrinkled and she was indeed old. She was too different from how the fairy described her. However, there were also two beautiful female cultivators behind her. One had a plump figure with a smile on her face. The other had even bones and skin as white as snow. She could be called a fairy. TSK. Feng Shuqing spoke with an unpleasant voice. "Old thief Jin, I knew you didn't put me in your heart. You didn't even inform me of such an important matter. If it wasn't for fellow Taoist Jiang's message, I would still be in the dark. Even now, you're still quibbling." Fairy Feng, are you here or are you not?" Jinyi asked with a loud laugh. Feng Shuqing's triangular eyes flashed with a trace of a smile, but she didn't say anything else. Juniors Feng Jieyu and Qing Hao greet Marshal Uncle Jin. The two female cultivators' crisp voices rang out. After Jinyi helped them up, Feng Shuqing glanced at Xiang Yang and the others and asked, "Are these fellow Taoist Jin's disciples? I don't think I've seen them before." Then, her gaze swept over Xiaohua and Shui and she frowned. Moreover, they brought two Qi refinement juniors. This trip to Flame Forest Swamp doesn't seem to be a place for boys' training, right? Lu Mingxing and Jiang Zhuqing naturally saw them, but they didn't want to say anything. Now that they heard this, they only looked at Jinyi curiously. Juniors Imperial Thunder Sect's Myriad Thunder Valley's disciples Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian greet seniors and martial brothers. Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian knew it was time for them to step forward and quickly bowed. Xiaohua and Shui also glanced at each other and stepped forward. Thunderclap Palace's Myriad Thunder Valley's Xiaohua greets seniors. Thunderclap Palace's Shui greets seniors. Xiaohua and Shui bowed. The Golden Core cultivators nodded slightly, and the Foundation Establishment cultivators cupped their hands in return. Among them, Xianyan School's Qianhan was slightly taken aback when she heard Xiaohua's name. She seemed to be thinking about something. After a long while, she revealed an expression of understanding and looked at Xiaohua thoughtfully. That's strange. Myriad Thunder Valleys. Thunderclap Palace's disciples. Why are they following fellow Taoist Jinyi? Feng Shuqing waved his hand and motioned for the four to rise. He covered his mouth and laughed. Of course there are some matters. Jinyi smiled. Although I brought these four juniors here, they also have to play a role in this matter. Therefore, they can't be considered as traveling with me. Jinyi's words were clear, and Feng Shuqing and the others were slightly taken aback. Jiang Shuqing gave Feng Shuqing a look, and Feng Shuqing spoke again. Why can't I understand fellow Taoist Jin's words? The trip to Flame Forest Swamp should be counted by sections. How can your Imperial Thunder sect be divided into two? If that's the case, we might as well count according to the number of people. Even if we count according to the number of people, Qi refinement disciples. I'm afraid it doesn't count. Jiang Zhuqing laughed. If that's the case, I would have brought over a dozen Qi refinement juniors. Since I said it, I naturally have my reasons. However, there are still a few fellow Taoists who haven't arrived yet. Forgive me for not saying anything. What? Old thief Shin, you invited other fellow Taoists? Feng Shuqing was immediately dissatisfied. How many pills can the Thunder Beast's inner core refine? If there are many people, will there be enough for us to share? Jinyi smiled and said, That Thunder Beast is with a fire ape. With the cultivation of the four of us, we should be able to trap the Thunder Beast. However, with the addition of a fire ape, will we succeed? Hearing this, not only did Feng Shuqing's expression change, but Jiang Shuqing and Lu Mingxing were also dissatisfied. Lu Mingxing asked, Fellow Taoist Jin, this is not appropriate. Since there's a fire ape, why didn't you say so in the message earlier? Otherwise, I could have asked the middle or late Gold Core senior brothers in the sect to help. Wouldn't both spirit beasts be subdued? Hee. Jinyi knew that Lu Mingxing's words could not be taken seriously, but he still smiled. Fellow Taoist Lu is right. It's a pity that the message I received was sent by 4 younger disciples. When I sent the message to you, I didn't know there was a fire ape. -8. Chapter 1883. So that's how it is. Jiang Zhuqing's expression softened, but he still shook his head. So the news about the Thunder Beast was spread by fellow Taoist Jin's juniors. Yes, fellow Taoist Jin, you have to reward these 4 juniors well. But I'm afraid it's impossible for your Imperial Thunder sect to get a share of the medicinal pills just because of a piece of news. Feng Shuqing was even more astonished. He almost sneered. Fellow Taoist Jin, these 4 juniors of yours are a little greedy? Although he said 4 juniors, it was obvious that he was referring to Jinyi. Xian Yang's face heated up slightly. He glanced at Jinyi but didn't explain further. I naturally have to discuss this matter with you all. Jinyi wasn't surprised, and he smiled as he spoke. But at this time, a red beam of light flew over. When Jinyi saw the transmission talisman, he smiled and pointed in the direction from which the transmission talisman had come. I thought I was already prepared, but who would have thought that fellow Taoist Xiang Min of the 5 Elements sect would be even more prepared? 5 Elements sect? Xiang Min? Feng Shuqing frowned slightly and said reproachfully, Fellow Taoist Jin, don't tell me the helper you invited is this little child? It can't be considered an invitation. Jinyi smiled bitterly. He knew that Xiang Min's reputation wasn't good. It's just a coincidence. As he spoke, he clapped his hands and sent out a messaging talisman. A moment later, Xiang Min's small figure appeared on the horizon not far away. Beside him were 2 early-stage Golden Core cultivators and 3 Foundation Establishment disciples behind them. Ha! Jinyi looked at everyone and gestured for them to stay on the mountain peak. He went forward and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoist Xiang, you're actually so well prepared. This is beyond my expectations. It's not just that. Xiang Min's face showed a hint of pride. He glanced at everyone on the mountain peak and said, I've been preparing for this fire ape for many years. If I wasn't confident, how would I dare to invite my friends? Then, he turned around and said, Come, fellow Taoist Zhang, fellow Taoist Sun, this is fellow Taoist Jin of the Imperial Thunder sect. Then, the 2 Golden Core cultivators besides Xiang Min greeted Jinyi. Their disciples also came over to greet them. It turned out that fellow Taoist Zhang was a cultivator from Jinghua City, Zhang Qingguang. His 2 early-stage Foundation Establishment disciples were Zhu Ming and Bai Mu. The other fellow Taoist Sun was a cultivator from the Imperial Elixir School, Sun Shangkong. His disciple was the early-stage Foundation Establishment Li Mian. After the greetings were over, Jinyi brought the 4 of them to the mountain peak. The cultivators from the various sects got to know each other and exchanged pleasantries. These were all Golden Core cultivators. Although some of them hadn't met before, they were all familiar with each other's names. For a moment, the mountain peak was filled with a joyous atmosphere. After a long while, everyone became familiar with each other. Then Jinyi said with a smile, Although we all have our own plans for coming to Flame Forest Marsh, Because the fire ape and the thunder beast are in the same place, we naturally have to act together. Previously, I was the initiator of this matter, and fellow Taoist Xiang was also the initiator of this matter. From now on, one person will have to be in charge. What do you think, fellow Taoist Xiang? Xiang Min didn't find this strange. She nodded and said, Fellow Taoist Jin's thoughts are exactly what I was thinking. But if fellow Taoist Jin is the one in charge, how will you arrange the future operations? I naturally have my own plans. But do I have to tell you now? Jinyi glanced at Xiang Min and didn't say much. Fellow Taoist Jin, since you want to be our leader, if you don't tell me, how can I be convinced? Even if I'm convinced, how can fellow Taoist Sun and fellow Taoist Zhang listen to your arrangements? Xiang Min said with a fake smile. Jinyi thought for a moment and said with a smile, My arrangements are simple. We'll gather together first and find the fire ape and the thunder beast in Flame Forest Marsh. When they're unprepared, we'll separate them. My group will attack the thunder beast while fellow Taoist Xiang's group will attack the fire ape. As for the specific details, we'll discuss it in detail after the matter is confirmed. What do you think, fellow Taoist Xiang? Ha! Xiang Min shook her little head like a rattledrum and said with a laugh, Fellow Taoist Jin's arrangement. To be honest, it's no different from having no arrangement at all. Jin Ye's expression didn't change. He said calmly, What do you mean, fellow Taoist Xiang? First of all, Flame Forest Marsh is so big that it's not easy to find the fire ape and the thunder beast. Moreover, if we find the fire ape and the thunder beast, won't they also find us? Separating them, TSK, I'm afraid it won't be easy, Xiang Min said with assurance. Moreover, since we've already merged into one, doesn't fellow Taoist Jin want a share of the fire ape's inner core? I won't hide it from fellow Taoist Jin. The thunder beast's inner core. I'm somewhat coveting it. Jinyi still had a card up his sleeve. He said with a smile, I naturally have a way to find that thunder beast. Fellow Taoist Xiang doesn't have to worry about this. Even if we set up an ambush, it's not impossible to let that thunder beast fall into our trap. But what fellow Taoist Xiang said. Without waiting for Jinyi to finish speaking, Xiang Min's face revealed a look of pleasant surprise. She said anxiously, What? Fellow Taoist Jin has a way to lure the thunder beast over? If so, our grand plan will succeed. Jin Ye's eyes turned rapidly. He nodded slightly and said with a smile, That's right. I have a way to lure the thunder beast over. However, what does fellow Taoist Xiang mean by the grand plan will succeed? Ha, Xiang Min didn't say anything else. She said with a smile, As expected, my opportunity has arrived. The heavens actually sent fellow Taoist Jin to me. I can't not want this fire ape's inner core. Fellow Taoist Jin, let's settle the matter of how we're going to distribute these two inner cores first. When Jinyi saw that Xiang Min was so confident, he couldn't help but be stunned. He turned to look at Lu Mingxing and the rest, then at Xiao Hua. He turned back and said to Xiang Min, Fellow Taoist Xiang, didn't you just say which fellow Taoist would be in charge of this matter? How did it become the distribution of inner cores? Fellow Taoist Jin, which sect do I belong to? Xiang Min said proudly. If fellow Taoist Jin has the confidence to lure the fire ape and the thunder beast over, then Xiang Min has the confidence to kill these two evil beasts. Since the two of us rely on each other, then, what difference does it make who's the one in charge? 5 elements sex array formation? Jinyi suddenly came to a realization. Joy also appeared on his face. He laughed loudly and said, I don't understand array formations myself, so I neglected 5 elements sex array formation. With fellow Taoist Xiang's array formation, I'm afraid the 2 spirit beasts won't be able to escape. Feng Shuqing, Jiang Zhucheng, and the others were also overjoyed when they heard this. Jiang Zhucheng also participated in the encirclement of the Thunder Beast last time. After all, the Thunder Beast cultivation was at the middle stage of the Gold Core realm. Several early-stage Gold Core realm cultivators relied on magic treasures and other things. but they could only fight to a draw with the Thunder Beast. There was even a slight gap between them and the Thunder Beast. With the help of the array formation, these 7 early-stage Gold Core Realm cultivators and a group of Foundation Establishment Realm disciples could definitely kill the Thunder Beast and the Fire Ape. So, before the Thunder Beast and the Fire Ape are lured here, fellow Taoist Jin can be in charge. After these 2 evil beasts enter the array formation, I'll be in charge. What do you think? Xiangmin was in a good mood and said while clapping her hands. -8. Chapter 1884. Great! I have no objections. What about you, fellow Taoists? Jinyi was the first to agree. After everyone agreed, Xiangmin smiled and said, Since we're so fated, we might as well divide the Thunder Beasts and the Fire Ape's cores into 7 portions, 1 for each of us. Zhang Qinghuang and Sun Xiangkong naturally agreed, while the other cultivators looked at Jinyi. Jinyi smiled and said, Our Thunder Beast cores are used to refine medicinal pills. If fellow Taoist Xiang doesn't mind my pill refining techniques, you can leave this matter to me and I'll just take the medicinal pills in the future. Otherwise, I'll take fellow Taoist's portion of the core. Hee, there's no need to trouble fellow Taoist Jin. I'll just take the original core. Xiangmin smiled and said, As for the Fire Ape's core, what I can give fellow Taoist is also the original core. That's great. Jinyi nodded and said, However, the cores of the 2 beasts can't be divided into 7 portions, but 8 portions. Why is that? Xiangmin looked at the golden core cultivator beside Jinyi and asked curiously. It's like this. Jinyi smiled and said, This poor Taoist wasn't able to lure the lightning beast over. Instead, it was a junior disciple of this poor Taoist who had the means to lure the Fire Ape over. Fellow Taoist Xiang has seen this junior disciple before. As he spoke, Jinyi pointed at Xiaohua and said, This is Xiaohua, a disciple of my Thunderclap Palace's Myriad Thunder Valley. He has a magic tool that can lure the Fire Ape over. However, he's not my disciple, so I can't force him to do anything. The price he has to pay is a portion of the Thunder Beast's and the Fire Ape's cores. Afterward, Jinyi repeated what Xiaohua said to everyone and said with a smile, I originally thought that since we're all cultivators of the Thunderclap sect and belong to the same sect, it's inappropriate to ask for an extra portion. However, since Xiaohua has this idea, he must have his reasons. Xiaohua indeed has no use for the medicinal pills I've refined. Therefore, I'll leave this matter to everyone to decide. Xiangmin stared at Xiaohua as if she wanted to see through him. Soon after, she chuckled and said, Xiangmin naturally has no objections. The Thunder Beast's inner core is abundant, so it doesn't matter if it's a little less. Moreover, if it wasn't for Xiaohua's fire-drawing ape technique, Xiangmin's formation could only be empty. What do fellow Taoist Zhang and fellow Taoist Sun think? Zhang Qingguang and Sun Xiangkong naturally followed Xiangmin's lead. Without hesitation, they smiled and said, I agree. I don't agree. Before Xiangmin could say anything, Feng Shouqing shrieked. I was wondering how fellow Taoist Jin was going to distribute the Lightning Beast cores. It turns out, you want to keep an extra portion for yourself. According to what I know, the distribution ratio has already been set. Each sect can only get 1 portion. Why did it change today? No wonder fellow Taoist Jin didn't mention it just now and insisted on waiting for fellow Taoist Xiang to come over. Could it be? Jinyi was unhappy at first. He raised his eyebrows. Feng Baiqing? What's wrong? Could it be that fellow Taoist Jin has made an appointment with me? Isn't it? You have made an agreement before. Feng Baiqing naturally wasn't afraid of me and retorted. Seeing this, Jiang Zhuqing hurriedly stepped forward and frowned. Fellow Taoist Feng, we are discussing the distribution of the spiritual beast's inner core. There's no need to involve other things. Since you don't agree, then don't agree. Humph. Feng Baiqing took a step back and looked coldly to the side. Fellow Taoist Jin, I won't say anything else. Jiang Zhuqing smiled. Although Xiaohua is a disciple of the 10,000 Thunder Valley, he is also a disciple of your Thunder Palace and your Thunder-controlling sect. He can be your helper and can be regarded as your disciple's helper. Fellow Taoist Jin can deal with his benefits after the Thunder-controlling sect. There's no need to entangle with us. Fellow Taoist Jin, do you think his contribution is the same as ours? Is he qualified to get this portion of the spiritual beast's inner core? My opinion is the same as fellow Taoist Feng's. I don't agree with this. And Jinyi didn't find it strange and looked at Lu Mingxing of the Rinsing Flower sect. Lu Mingxing thought for a moment and sighed. According to my previous opinion, which is also the same as fellow Taoist Feng and fellow Taoist Jiang, Xiaohua is only an aura-refining disciple. He really can't compare with us. It's impossible for him to get an extra share. However, things have changed now. First, there is the addition of the fire ape. That's a 5th-stage spiritual beast with an early gold core cultivation base, but we don't have the slightest chance of defeating it. Second, there is the participation of fellow Taoist Xiang and the others, as well as fellow Taoist Xiang's formation. With this formation and fellow Taoist Xiang and the others' help, I'm afraid our chances of success will increase by another 40%. But think about it. If the Thunder Beast and the Fire Ape don't enter this formation, what's the use of this 40% chance of success? However, if fellow Taoist Xiang follows us to look for the Thunder Beast, I'm afraid our chances of killing the Thunder Beast and the Fire Ape won't increase by even 10%, right? Fellow Taoist Lu, you mean you agree to give the Thunder-controlling sect 2 portions? Jiang Zhuqing said thoughtfully. Hee, I don't completely agree, Lu Mingxing said with a smile. If Xiaohua can lure the Fire Ape over, then the Thunder Beast can naturally follow. This way, our chances of killing it will increase by 20%, but the problem is, can Xiaohua lure the Fire Ape over? That's right. Feng Shuqing screamed again. Fellow Taoist Xiang, don't tell me you don't have any methods to lure the Fire Ape over when you set up the formation? Humph! Of course I do. Xiang Min's expression turned cold. My disciple, Chan Xinyan, has a raging fire physique, and precisely has the Fire Ape's bloodline. I originally wanted to borrow his true spirit, true blood to lure the Fire Ape over, but I don't know which bastard killed him, and even his corpse can't be found. This matter. Fellow Taoist Jin also knows about it. And that's right. Because of this matter, fellow Taoist Xiang even misunderstood me, thinking that I killed his disciple, and even attacked him. Jinyi suddenly understood why Xiang Min was so angry, and attacked him without saying anything else. Motherfucker, I'm really lucky. Xiaohua didn't raise his head. He kept looking at the ground, and he inwardly cried out that he was lucky. Jiang Zhuqing spoke again. Fellow Taoist Lu, do you mean, if Xiaohua can really lure the Fire Ape and the Thunder Beast over, he can get a share of the spiritual beast's inner cores? Isn't this too easy? Hee, Xiang Min sneered and said. If fellow Taoist Jian has the ability to lure the Fire Ape over, I can give you half of my share of the spiritual beast's inner cores. Fellow Taoist Xiang, Feng Shuqing sneered. How can you be so generous? Could it be that your previous allocation? That's right, Xiang Min said proudly. In my agreement with fellow Taoist Zhang and fellow Taoist Sun, luring the Fire Ape is also part of it. So that's how it is. Xiaohua was delighted. Since there was a precedent, he wasn't afraid of anything. You can wait for the precedent, but I don't agree with it. Feng Shuqing glanced at the 2 disciples behind him and said, These 2 foundation-building disciples of mine also have to contribute, so there's no need to mention allocation at all. What qualifications does an aura-refining disciple have? Why don't all the disciples be included? But when she said this, she shut her mouth again. The Imperial Thunder sect obviously needed 2 more disciples. Cough, cough. Jiang Shuqing coughed twice, interrupting Feng Shuqing's words. He looked at Lu Mingxing and asked, Fellow Taoist Lu, do you agree or not? Hee. Lu Mingxing laughed and said, If Xiaohua can lure the Fire Ape over, I'll agree. Otherwise, I won't agree. Great! Jinyi clapped and said. Now, I have 7 fellow Taoists. Even if you exclude me, you still have 3.5 fellow Taoists who agree, so this matter is settled. Fellow Taoist Lu didn't say he agreed, Feng Shuqing said anxiously. What? Fellow Taoist Feng, am I wrong? Jinyi sneered and said. If fellow Taoist Feng thinks you can kill the Thunder Beast, then there's no problem. The entire Thunder Beast's inner core is yours. I definitely don't want anything. Now I can obviously get an extra portion of the Fire Ape's inner core. Fellow Taoist Xiang already understood, and fellow Taoist Lu also understood. Why can't fellow Taoist Feng understand? But your Imperial Thunder sect will get an extra portion of the spiritual beast's inner core, Feng Shuqing argued. That's because my Imperial Thunder sect's disciple has the ability. Jinyi was a bit angry. If your disciple can lure the Fire Ape over, this portion will also be yours. Why not? My disciple also has a fire physique, Feng Shuqing said without hesitation. Then, he pointed at the female cultivator with the well-proportioned bones and said, Qing Hao, come here. Yes, master. Qing Hao obeyed and came forward. He, the disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, right? Xiang Min glanced at Qing Hao and sneered. This old man naturally knows about the Imperial Thunder sect's fire rat bloodline. If you want to kill the first-rank spiritual beast, the fire rat, your disciple's bloodline will certainly be useful. However, if you want to lure the Fire Ape over, this old man thinks you'd better not overestimate yourself. Although Qing Hao was a foundation-building cultivator, her face had already turned red from being mocked by a golden core cultivator. However, she didn't dare to retort and could only look down at the ground. Feng Shuqing was too anxious and neglected the matter of the bloodline for a moment, which made him lose face for no reason. Just as she was about to speak, Jiang Zhuchen hurriedly said, All right, don't make fun of the younger generation. We still have to learn from fellow Taoist Jin and guide the younger generation. Since most of the fellow Taoists have agreed, let's do it this way. Qing Hao hurriedly stepped back. Jinyi nodded and said, Fellow Taoist Jiang is right. This matter isn't a big deal in the first place. 90% of the Thunder Beast's inner core is enough for us to refine medicinal pills. I was just afraid that everyone would hold a grudge, so I said it. Great. Fellow Taoist Jin is really open and aboveboard. Xiang Min clapped and praised. No matter if it's I or fellow Taoist Xiang, we should be fair, Jinyi said with a smile. Xiang Min smiled again and ignored Jinyi. Instead, she looked at Xiao Hua and asked with interest. Xiao Hua, this old man has a question. Senior Xiang, please. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly bowed. This old man wants to know, if we don't agree to let you have a share, what will you do? Xiao Hua didn't think at all and said with a smile, Senior, this matter, isn't it meaningless? Seniors have already decided on this matter, how can we go back on our words? This junior will just follow the seniors. -8. Chapter 1885. Xiao Hua, I can go back on my word at any time. Xiang Min was clearly vindictive towards Xiao Hua's previous rebuttal. Xiao Hua didn't have any expression on his face, but he was annoyed in his heart. He didn't say anything, but reached out his hand and patted his chest, then smiled and said, Senior Xiang, this matter is nothing more than reason, and the distribution is nothing more than effort. This junior has this request, and can also help the seniors. The seniors will definitely pity this junior. This junior's little request, the seniors will naturally agree. Looking at Xiao Hua's gesture of dispersing, Xiang Min seemed to have already anticipated it. She chuckled and said to Jinyi at the side, Fellow Taoist Jin, you're a cultivator of the Imperial Thunder sect. Your bones aren't ordinary. The current Jinyi was different from a few days ago. He knew that he had to rely on Xiang Min's spell formation to kill the lightning beasts. Thus, he smiled and said, The Myriad Thunder Valley is very famous in my thunderous palace. Master and disciple are both straightforward, so fellow Taoist Xiang doesn't need to mind. Xiang Min chuckled again and ignored Xiao Hua and the others. He called Jin Yi, Zhang Qingguang, and the others, and the few of them began to discuss how to set up the spell formation. Xiang Min was a cultivator of the Five Elements sect. He was good at spell formations, and his specialty was the Five Elements soul-capturing spell formation. As long as a cultivator fell into the spell formation, not only would their magic power be captured, even their soul would be extracted. Of course, Xiang Min was only in the early Aurus Core stage and couldn't really extract a cultivator's soul. But even so, Xiang Min's words could make the fire apes and lightning beasts confused and reduce 20% of their strength. This kind of spell formation naturally couldn't rely on manpower. The most important thing was the terrain and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Furthermore, the flame forest swamp was filled with violent fire-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth, which was very disadvantageous to the Five Elements spell formation. Of course, Xiang Min had already considered these factors before coming to the flame forest swamp. He had already made some changes to his spell formation. Now that Xiao Hua could lure the fire apes over, Xiang Min and the others only needed to find a suitable terrain. After Xiang Min explained the conditions of the spell formation to everyone, the 7 Aurus Core cultivators each brought their own disciples and went to different directions in the flame forest swamp. Xiao Hua naturally followed behind Jin Yi, and the direction they were heading towards was where the Spirit Husbandry sect had set up the formation. After just flying for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xiao Hua looked all around and said in a low voice, "Grand Master Jin, Junior has a matter." "Oh? Speak." Jin Yi wasn't surprised at all. He didn't even turn his head as he spoke indifferently. Junior's dermic artifact seems to only be able to sense the fire ape's location. I'm afraid it can't lure the fire ape over." Xiao Hua smiled apologetically and said, "It doesn't matter if Junior can't obtain the Thunder Beast's inner core, but don't delay Grand Master's important matter." "Humph," Jin Yi sneered. He turned his head to look at Xiao Hua's respectful and reverent expression and said unhappily, "You're probably complaining in your heart that this old man didn't explain the conditions clearly, right?" No. Xiao Hua had an embarrassed expression on his face. He actually understood what Jin Yi was thinking, but the Naiden was truly related to Xiang Yang's life and death. At this time, he had no choice but to risk offending Jin Yi and warn him. "Do you think that just because you can sense the fire ape's location, those old bastards will give you a share of the spiritual beast's inner core?" Jin Yi seemed to be in a good mood. He released his divine sense to observe the terrain below him and said, "Knowing and luring the fire ape are two different matters. Moreover, the divine sense of a gold core cultivator isn't something that you Qi refining disciples can understand. If you pay attention to the movements within several dozen li, you'll be able to sense them. Sensing the fire ape isn't a particularly difficult matter. If this old man didn't praise your divine ability, just that slut foam witching alone would be enough to mess up this matter." But this old man also didn't expect Xiang Min would actually be able to lay down a 5 elements formation. This is an exceptional opportunity. But Junior is afraid that the location of the formation is too far from the core of Flame Forest Marsh. Junior won't be able to sense the fire ape, let alone luring it over. Xiao Hua was truly somewhat worried about his personal gains and losses. Jin Yi had clearly stated the conditions. If he couldn't lure the fire ape over, then he wouldn't be able to get a share of the Thunder Beast's inner core. "Idiot! If you can sense the fire ape's location, then won't you be able to lure it over?" Jin Yi scolded. "You only need to fly close to the fire ape and lure it over." Junior understands." Junior was muddle-headed. Xiao Hua immediately came to his senses and smiled apologetically. "This old man also saw that you're quick-witted. You didn't even use a single curse word when you scolded Xiang Min, that's why this old man reminded you. If it was you, this old man, who is as stupid as an ox, this old man wouldn't even care." Jin Yi glanced at the silent Xiang Yang. Facing a gold core cultivator like Jin Yi, Xiang Yang was indeed like a child. He couldn't say anything and could only smile along. The 5 elements formation required the spiritual qi of heaven and earth to have all 5 elements. This was an extremely easy problem in other places, but in Flame Forest Marsh, it was troublesome. Others didn't know that Xiaohua had been flying with Jinyi for half a day. Apart from the scarlet flames that filled their eyes, the air was steaming with mist, and only the fire-type spiritual qi was present. The other 4 types of spiritual qi were extremely scarce, especially the water-type spiritual qi, which was nearly extinct. Hee, that place seems pretty good. Xiaohua didn't dare to release his Buddhist awareness and only used his weak divine sense to observe the surroundings. He then heard Jinyi whisper with a smile on his face. Soon after, Jinyi indeed flew for several dozen kilometers and found a place between 2 scarlet mountain ranges. This canyon was sandwiched between 2 mountain ranges and was about 1 kilometer wide. The most suitable location was that the canyon's terrain was somewhat high. The lava in the fire lake beside it couldn't flow in, so the area within several kilometers was filled with gravel. Moreover, it was unknown what kind of spiritual stones were underground. Apart from the water-type spiritual qi being somewhat barren, there were also some metal-type, wood-type, and earth-type spiritual qi. Jinyi flew to this place and looked around. He then clapped his hands and said, "Great, this is the place!" However, Jinyi's subsequent actions caused Xiaohua's heart to tremble. Jinyi instructed, "Wait here for a moment." Then, he flew to the side of one of the mountain ranges. With a wave of his hand, he used a mountain range magic technique and disappeared. Xiaohua and the others looked at each other in dismay. Although they wanted to know what Jinyi was doing, they didn't dare to release their divine sense, and could only obediently stay in the air. After the time it took to finish a meal, Jinyi leisurely walked out. He had a refreshed look on his face. He stretched out his hand and sent out a transmission talisman. Then, he lowered his head and found a flat place to sit down. "We'll also go down!" Xiangyang waved his hand and landed about 10 meters away from Jinyi. He was now somewhat regretful. He wanted to send a voice transmission to Xiaohua, but he was afraid Jinyi would discover him. He wanted to take Yanqinglian, Xiaohua, and the others and leave, but it was obvious that Xiangmin and the others absolutely wouldn't let Xiaohua leave, let alone Jinyi. -8. Chapter 1886. We've spun a cocoon around ourselves. Xiangyang sighed. He looked at Yanqinglian, who also had a strange expression, and sat down first. Xiaohua was not as pessimistic as Xiangyang. His eyes darted around, looking here and there. No one knew what he was thinking. Not long after, Xiangmin's communication talisman came again. Sure enough, they didn't find a suitable place, and everyone was rushing here. After a full day, the other 6 gold core cultivators brought their respective disciples to this place. Xiangmin's face was not satisfied. After looking for a long time, he took out an unknown magic tool from his storage pouch and flew several laps around the entire canyon. Finally, he sighed and said, "The 5 elements spiritual qi here is relatively mixed. Although it conforms to what I said just now, it is still not the best place to set up a formation. It's fine. We'll look elsewhere." Jinyi heard and immediately stood up, about to fly away. At this time, Feng Shuqing said in a sharp voice, "Fellow Taoist Jin, don't be anxious." Then, he turned to Xiangmin and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiang, the fire attribute spiritual energy in Flame Forest Marsh is abundant, diluting all other types of spiritual energy. Furthermore, the entire terrain of Flame Forest Marsh is filled with magma. Even the area near Western Huang Town doesn't have a place with abundant spiritual energy of all 5 elements. We can't possibly retreat back to Western Huang Town. Sai, how can I not know this?" Xiangmin smiled bitterly and said, "But if the 5 elements spiritual qi is not balanced, the 5 elements soul capturing formation cannot be sealed, and the formation's effect will be greatly reduced. Fellow Taoist Xiang knows the situation in Flame Forest Marsh is like this. Don't tell me you don't have any countermeasures," Jiang Shuqing said with a smile. Xiangmin rolled her eyes in annoyance, and said with a wave of her sleeve, "Of course I have a countermeasure. But this Xiang's countermeasures have all fallen on my disciples. Now that they have disappeared, this countermeasure is incomplete. What do you mean, fellow Taoist Xiang? Feng Shuqing asked curiously. It's nothing. At this point, Xiang Min had nothing to hide. My 5 elements sex 5 elements formation uses the 5 elements magic treasure as the formation core, and uses the 5 elements spiritual qi as the formation guide. It's best if the 5 elements spiritual qi is evenly distributed and equal. However, if the 5 elements spiritual qi is not very evenly distributed, we can also teach 5 disciples with physiques of different attributes how to control the formation. We can let them use their own bodies as vessels to draw in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and spit out the true qi of their respective attributes. Oh, I see. Feng Shuqing looked at Chang Zhangqingguang and smiled. And said, Fellow Taoist, what attributes do your disciples have? Ha, Zhang's disciples have wood and earth. My son's disciples, metal. Feng Baiqing said with a smile. So one of your disciples is of the water element, while the other is of the fire element? Yes, of course. There was no expression on Xiang Min's face. Water and fire are the most opposing attributes among the 5 elements. My disciple is the best. I can't say for other attributes, but my disciple has fire attributes. Can't we find a disciple with water attributes? Feng Shuqing said disdainfully. If it's as fellow Taoist Feng said, then it's very simple. Xiang Min shook her head. Although the 5 disciples of the 5 elements formation don't need to control the formation, the changes in the formation, especially the release of 5 elements spiritual qi, have to be uniform. If they haven't been trained, I'm afraid it won't be easy. She then looked at Zhang Qingguang and the others and smiled bitterly. I've been planning with fellow Taoist Sun and fellow Taoist Zhang for a long time. My 5 disciples have also practiced a lot. That's why I dared to come to Flame Forest Swamp. In just a few days. I'm afraid it's not appropriate. Everyone frowned. They didn't expect that setting up a 5 elements formation would require so much attention. Jinyi thought for a moment and smiled. How about this? Fellow Taoist Xiang, we'll go look for the terrain. You teach the technique of controlling the formation to each disciple. Cough, cough. Since the disciples of Jinghua City and Imperial Alchemy School can comprehend it, there's no reason that the disciples of Huangdao sect can't, right? I'm sure fellow Taoist Xiang won't hide it, right? If we find a good terrain and can set up an excellent formation, then let the disciples of Huangdao sect swear a heart oath that they won't teach the formation to outsiders. If we don't have an excellent terrain, fellow Taoist Xiang will reluctantly set up the formation here. How about it? Great! Lu Mingxin clapped and said. Fellow Taoist Jin, you're right. Xiang Min thought for a moment and nodded. That's the only way now. She then asked. Which fellow Taoist disciple is of the water element? Their cultivation can't be too low. Lu Mingxin looked at everyone and smiled. My disciple, Li Fengzhu, is of the water element. However, his cultivation is only at the early stage of foundation establishment. I wonder how he'll fare. This? Xiang Min shook her head slightly. The fire element spiritual qi here is very strong. Water element spiritual qi is restrained. Fellow Taoist Feng's disciple has a fire element physique and is at the early stage of foundation establishment. Then, the water element disciple should be at the middle stage of foundation establishment. The middle stage of foundation establishment is best. Is the early stage of foundation establishment okay? Sun Shankong smiled. Without waiting for Xiang Min to speak, Feng Baiqing looked at Jiang Zhuchen and the others. None of your disciples have water element? Everyone shook their heads. What about the Imperial Thunder sect? Feng Baiqing asked Jinyi again. My Imperial Thunder sect's disciples are of the thunder and fire elements. There are very few disciples with other physiques, Jinyi said with a smile. I'm afraid that's the only way. Feng Baiqing was a bit discouraged, but her eyes suddenly lit up again. She pointed at Xiaohua and Shuai and said, What physiques do these 2 disciples have? Jinyi naturally didn't know. He turned around and asked, Xiao Hua, Shui Shui, what physiques are you waiting for? Disciple is of the fire element, disciple is of the thunder element. The two of them said in unison. Ha, that's it, Feng Baiqing said with a smile. Let Xiao Hua replace Qing. He's an aura refining disciple, so his magic power is lower than Li Fengzhu's. Isn't that perfect? Huh! Xiao Hua was stunned. He couldn't help but smile wryly in his heart. He knew very well that his magic power was definitely higher than Li Fengzhu's. This balance between water and fire still couldn't be achieved. It's not appropriate, it's not appropriate. Xiang Min shook her head first. Xiao Hua isn't an aura refining disciple. His magic power is too low. He can't cooperate with the other 4 foundation establishment disciples. No, absolutely no. He's just a thunder-controlling sect disciple. If he can attract the fire ape, he'll get a share of the thunder beast's inner core. If he still doesn't do anything, I'll withdraw. Feng Baiqing snorted coldly and said, It's just cooperation. We won't use the true qi inside its body. This flame forest swamp is filled with fire element spiritual qi. Is there a need to take his true qi? Xiang Min had never thought about letting an aura refining disciple go to the formation core, so she refused without hesitation. But after hearing Feng Baiqing's words, she thought about it for a moment and nodded. Fellow Taoist Feng's words make some sense. However, I'll take a look for now. If it doesn't work when operating the formation, how about letting Qing Hao replace it? And let's do that for now. Feng Baiqing curled her lips slightly and didn't say anything else. Grand Master! Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He called out in a low voice and looked at Jingyi. I'll listen to fellow Taoist Xiang, Jingyi said without hesitation. Xiao Hua opened his mouth, but he couldn't say a word. He simply couldn't refuse. Soon after, Jingyi and the others flew away in different directions. Xiang Min stayed behind and had the other disciples patrol around. She took out a few jade slips and handed them to Xiao Hua, Qing Hao, and the others. She said, These are the methods to control water and fire in the 5 elements formation. They're all different. Make a heart oath and use your divine sense to memorize them first. Once you return the jade slips to this old man will teach you. Xiao Hua and the others made a heart oath, then held the jade slips in their hands and immersed their divine sense in them to comprehend them. Xian Yang took Yan Qinglian and Shui Shui to patrol one side of the valley. This was the side that Jingyi had just passed by. Xian Yang released his divine sense and scanned the place. Then, he transmitted his voice. Wife, did you see any clues? Yan Qinglian shook her head. How can we guess the divine abilities of a golden core cultivator? I didn't even look at them. Xiang Yang frowned and smiled apologetically. If I knew that the lightning beast's inner core would be so troublesome, this husband wouldn't have come to join in the fun. Hee hee. Yan Qinglian was rather optimistic and said with a smile. Now, it's hard to get off the donkey. Husband, don't think too much. Moreover, even if it's as difficult as a lake of fire, this lowly concubine is willing to exchange it for your lifespan. Little junior brother is also willing. Little junior brother. Warmth flashed in Xiang Yang's eyes. His gaze couldn't help but look at Xiao Hua, who was sitting cross-legged in the valley. The 5 elements sex formation control technique wasn't too complicated. For Qing Hao, who had never seen a formation before, it was naturally very difficult. However, for Xiao Hua, it was nothing. He only had to finish reading the things inside the jade slips to understand. It was nothing more than combining the formation, controlling magic power, and harmonizing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around him to cooperate with Xiang Min's technique. Naturally, just as Xiang Min said, this thing relied on tacit understanding and proficiency. However, Xiao Hua didn't think he was infallible. While listening to Qing Hao's questions, he also added in a few sentences from time to time. His performance was no different from an aura refining disciple. Xiao Hua liked to ask questions, so after half a day, he didn't let Xiang Min see anything. 10 days had passed since they had comprehended the method of controlling the formation. The 6 Jinan stage seniors had not sent any messages back, and Xiao Hua and the others had already understood what they should have understood. They only needed to cooperate with each other. Forget it. Xiang Min looked at the red sun in the sky and waved her sleeve. Several summoning talismans flew out, and she said with a wry smile, "Since they still haven't sent back a message, I'm afraid there's no place more suitable than here." Soon after, without waiting for Jin Yi and the others to return, she began to arrange the 5 elements soul-capturing formation. In Xiao Hua's mind, wasn't it just arranging a formation? Who hadn't done it before? It would only take half a day or a day to complete it. However, when he saw Xiang Min's cautiousness and how she put the most basic formation flags, formation plates, and other things into the valley, he suddenly realized that the 5 elements soul-capturing formation covered the entire valley. It was a formation that covered an area of several kilometers. It was far from simple. -8. Chapter 1887. As a result, Xiao Hua unconsciously paid attention to it while feeling disdainful. Fortunately, Xiang Min didn't avoid people. She used 2 days to set up the entire framework of the Great Array. Then, according to the order of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, she arranged the 5 array cores one by one. Each array core actually took 4 to 5 days of work. By the time the entire Great Array was set up, nearly a month had passed. Jin Yi and the others had gradually returned 10 days after Xiang Min finished setting up the array. Jin Yi and the others naturally didn't stay idle. They held the jade slip Xiang Min gave them in their hands and comprehended it. It also contained part of the control of the formation. After the formation was activated, they prepared to enter the formation and assist Xiang Min in killing the enemy. Xiao Hua's group of 6 naturally didn't patrol around the valley like Xiang Yan and the others. After Xiang Min set up the array core, they were arranged to be in the array core by Xiang Min gloriously. It was to comprehend the changes in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the array core. Xiao Hua released his divine sense and could sense the changes in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth due to the arrangement of the array. However, if he were to use these changes to control his Fa Li, it would be a little difficult. Of course, Xiao Hua's eyes almost never left Xiang Min's formation. Sometimes, even his magic eyes were open. From beginning to end, watching a great formation being set up was definitely a rare opportunity for Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's attention naturally aroused Xiang Min's vigilance as well. Unfortunately, this 5-element formation was a grand formation. If it was under normal circumstances, it would be set up by a few 5-element sect cultivators. Under the best circumstances, it should be set up by cultivators of the 5 types of physiques, and in the end, the cultivator who presided over the formation would combine them. However, Xiang Min coveted the fire ape's inner core and didn't want the other disciples of the sect to interfere. Therefore, she could only set up the formation by herself. Not to mention the exhaustion, the method of setting up the formation was also exposed. After Xiang Min finished setting up all the formations, her sharp gaze swept over Xiao Hua and she transmitted her voice. "Xiao Hua, did you enjoy watching it?" "It's very enjoyable." Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and smiled apologetically. "I've heard of formations a long time ago and have also encountered some formations, but I've never seen how they were set up. Now that I've seen Senior Xiang's technique, although I haven't seen the might of this 5 elements formation, but in terms of the area covered by this formation, the formations that I've encountered before are not worth mentioning. Moreover, Senior Xiang, I've also heard from others that the path of formations is the most profound. It's more profound than any mental cultivation method, alchemy technique, or talisman technique. It's absolutely impossible for a formation to be set up by a single cultivator. It should be set up by at least 2 cultivators of the same cultivation level. Elder, how did you manage to complete it by yourself?" Xiao Hua said very sincerely. "This is also what this little one is most puzzled about in these past few days." A hint of pride appeared on Xiang Min's face. He waved his hand and said, "You're an aura-refining disciple who doesn't know anything about formations. What do you know? The path of formations is not something you can pry into. What you know is nothing more than hearsay. How can you take it seriously? If a cultivator's Tao technique is profound and he is proficient in array formations, why can't he set up an array formation by himself? Xiaohua bowed. This time, he was just as sincere as before. Thank you for your guidance, Senior Xiang. When he saw that Xiaohua, who had always been somewhat arrogant and unruly, actually thanked him after hearing a few words, he was stunned at first. However, he soon realized that Xiaohua was thanking him because he piqued at his method of setting up the formation. Thus, he raised his brows and looked at Jinyi, who wasn't far away, and said in a low voice, "You're quite obedient and eager to learn. It's a pity that you're not a disciple of my Five Elements sect. Otherwise, this old man would have been able to give you proper guidance." Hee, thank you for your praise, Senior. When Xiaohua saw that he had fooled him, he said with a smile, "This little one has been watching for a long time. I've always been looking forward to seeing Senior's elegant demeanor and activating this formation. Let's see what kind of might it has." "Ha, don't worry. I definitely won't disappoint you." Xiangmin laughed. He flicked his sleeves and walked towards Jinyi and the others. Xiangmin naturally exhausted his magic power and mental strength to set up the Five Elements soul-capturing formation. He rested in the valley for 3 days before he recovered. Then, Xiangmin discussed with Jinyi and the others. They would first practice the method of controlling the formation until they were familiar with it. Only then would Xiaohua and the Fire Ape come over. Naturally, everyone agreed. Thus, Xiaohua and the others sat cross-legged in the 5 formation eyes of the 5 elements soul-capturing formation according to the previous arrangement. Xiangmin took out 5 magic treasures of different styles from his storage bag and placed them in front of the 5 people. Then, he flew to the sky above the valley, which was also the center of the formation. He clapped his hands, and a round plate about 3 feet in size flew in front of him. This round plate was the main formation disc of the 5 elements soul-capturing formation, the 5 elements disc. Xiangmin opened his mouth and a mouthful of true essence fell on the 5 elements disc. The 5 elements disc trembled slightly and began to rotate extremely slowly. Then, Xiangmin continuously cast seals on the 5 elements disc. The 5 elements disc sped up its rotation, and as it rotated, it began to emit a bright red brilliance. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the brilliance became a brilliant ball of light. Xiangmin shouted from high up in the sky. "Fire formation I Xiaohua, inject your magic power into the magic treasure." "Yes. Disciple understands." Xiaohua didn't dare to neglect. Although he knew that he might expose his strength, at this moment, it was impossible for him to have any chance to retreat. Xiaohua formed seals and injected his magic power into the triangular magic treasure in front of him according to what he comprehended in these dozens of days. Wang. With the infusion of Xiaohua's magic power, the magic treasure gradually flew up from the ground and slowly flew above Xiaohua's head. The magic treasure in the eye was suffused with red brilliance. Xiangmin was very satisfied with the 5 elements disc. The ball of light on the 5 elements disc separated a ray of light and shot toward the magic treasure above Xiaohua's head. In the blink of an eye, the magic treasure and the 5 elements disc were connected together, and the brilliance on the 5 elements disc became more and more brilliant. Just when the magic treasure and the 5 elements plate were connected, Xiaohua suddenly felt a powerful suction force coming from within the magic treasure. He didn't dare to be careless, and once again used the unique technique of the 5 elements array to absorb the surrounding fire attribute spiritual energy of heaven and earth into his body, and then without refining it, he sent it into the magic treasure. However, just when the fire attribute spirit energy in Xiaohua's body was being transferred to the magic treasure according to the method given in the jade slip, there suddenly appeared a continuous obscure connection. It was the same as when Xiaohua used the prairie fire cultivation technique to refine the fire attribute spirit energy in heaven and earth. Although it was only a discontinuous obscure, the spirit energy sent to the magic treasure was less. At the same time, the light between the magic treasure and the 5 elements disc appeared to be faintly bright and dark. "Xiaohua!" Xiangmin shouted. Dozens of days of comprehension, is it still not enough for you to comprehend the method of control? Yes. Xiaohua was also puzzled in his heart. The method he used was indeed correct, but he didn't know why it would cause a continuous obscure connection. However, Xiaohua tried a few more times, and the results were usually the same. -8. Chapter 1888. Humph! Xiangmin coldly snorted and slapped the five elements plate with her hand. The resplendent orange-red brilliance just now was annihilated, and the brilliance between the five elements plate and the fire-type magic treasure also scattered. The fire-type magic treasure directly fell on top of Xiaohua's head. Rise! Xiangmin turned around and saw the water formation eye opposite Xiaohua. Over there was the Huanhua Sect's early-stage foundation establishment cultivator, Li Fengzhu. Xiangmin activated her technique, and the five elements plate spun while emitting a light blue brilliance. Immediately, Li Fengzhu also activated the water-type magic treasure on the formation eye. An azure ray of light connected the five elements plate and the water-type magic treasure together. That ray of light was overflowing with color, and the azure light constantly flowed, appearing very stable. The five elements plate also stopped in the air. Excellent! Xiangmin smiled and said. As expected of a foundation establishment cultivator, extraordinary! Then she turned around and said to Xiaohua, Xiaohua, although the water-fire formation eye isn't the most basic formation eye of the five elements formation, it is the most important in this flame forest swamp. We must first activate these two formation eyes. Are you ready now? Xiaohua nodded and said, Disciple is ready! And I'll try again. Xiangmin restrained her temper and spat out another mouthful of true essence. The five elements plate spun again, but this time, when Xiangmin used her technique, an orange-red dot suddenly appeared in the light blue brilliance. As the five elements plate spun and Xiangmin poured in her magic power, the orange-red dot became increasingly larger until it reached half the size of the five elements plate. It was exactly the same as the light blue. Seeing this, Xiaohua promptly did the same as before. He activated the fire-type magic treasure in the air, but as before, the orange-red light between the fire-type magic treasure and the five elements plate was a faint light, and it was a clear contrast with the azure light of the water-type magic treasure. With a crisp "pa" sound, Xiangmin extinguished the orange-red brilliance above the five elements plate, and the five elements plate stopped in the air. Xiaohua! Xiangmin's face was very gloomy as she landed in front of Xiaohua. Her small stature, which was much shorter than Xiaohua, actually stirred up an extremely frightening aura. Clearly, Xiangmin was extremely angry. Xiaohua, what's wrong with you? Such a simple control technique, can't you practice? Jinyi naturally couldn't let Xiangmin reprimand the Imperial Thunder Sect disciple, so he immediately frowned. Reporting to Grand Master. Xiaohua also had a wronged expression on his face as he said with a bitter face. Although this technique is the method to control the formation, this junior can also comprehend it. It's also normal when I circulate the spiritual energy in my body, but it's inexplicable, producing an unclear and obscure feeling. Ah? Obscure. Xiangmin was stunned and immediately understood. She said in shock, You have a fire attribute constitution? Junior naturally has a fire attribute physique. Moreover, it's a concealed fire physique. Xiaohua's heart immediately quivered, and a trace of unease arose in his heart. Xiaohua should have a fire attribute physique. Jinyi nodded and said, Our Imperial Thunder Sect rarely accepts disciples with physiques other than those with lightning and fire attributes. Moreover, all disciples have to be tested before they enter the Imperial Thunder Sect. That shouldn't be. Xiangmin furrowed her brows tightly. Only disciples who don't have a fire attribute physique will have difficulty controlling the fire attribute spiritual energy of heaven and earth through their bodies. Difficulty means that they are close to the fire attribute. Then Xiangmin stared at Xiaohua and asked, You have a pure fire physique? This? Xiaohua hesitated and said, This junior also doesn't know, but during the test, there were other colors. What colors? Xiang Min asked. Xiaohua shook his head. Disciple doesn't know. It was tested by others. There were also many people. Disciple didn't understand this at that time. I didn't even know it was a physique test. Really troublesome. Xiang Min also couldn't say anything about the Imperial Thunder sect. She turned to Feng Shuqing and said, Fellow Taoist Feng, let your sect's disciple try. At this moment, Feng Shuqing couldn't say anything. He could only let Qing Hao take the center of Xiaohua's formation. As everyone expected, Qing Hao easily activated the fire attribute magic weapon. The orange light above the 5-element disc was like the azure light, flowing with brilliant colors. The orange light flowed freely. After that, the metal attribute Li Mian stood on the metal attribute formation core and used the golden light to connect the 5-element disc and the metal attribute magic weapon together. The wood attribute Li Mian stood on the wood attribute formation core and used the cyan light to connect the 5-element disc and the wood attribute magic weapon together. However, just as everyone's hearts were about to relax, another change occurred. Jinghua City's Bai Mu, an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator who had long practiced the Earth-type array core countless times, was actually the same as Xiaohua, unable to connect the Earth-type magic treasure with the 5-element disc. In fact, he was even inferior to Xiaohua. The dark brown light was intermittent, almost unable to connect. Zhang Qingguang's face immediately turned ugly. He first scolded Bai Mu, but Bai Mu also felt wrong. He had practiced the technique for a long time and was already confident. However, just like Xiaohua, when the spiritual energy of heaven and earth flowed through his body, it produced an obscure state. Zhang Qingguang frowned, looked at Xiang Min and explained. Bai Mu was personally taught by I. His physique is earth attribute. Could it be? Fellow Taoist Zhang, can you show me the magic tool used to test disciples' attributes? Xiang Min couldn't say this to Jingyi, but she didn't have any scruples with Zhang Qingguang. Zhang Qingguang shook his head. That thing is only used to test disciples' attributes. It's not usually used. Why would I need that thing? Feng Shuqing also smiled. If you don't have a magic tool, then you can only look at spells. Which fellow Taoist can practice such a useless spell? When Feng Shuqing said this, even if someone practiced it, they definitely wouldn't make a sound. Sigh. Xiang Min clapped her hands and took out a fist-sized bead. She said helplessly, This is the 5-element bead of my 5-element sect. Although it's not used to test the body's attributes, it still has this effect. Fellow Taoist Zhang, please ask your sect's disciples to come over. There's no need to circulate or anything like that. Just hold it in your hand, hold your breath, and wait quietly. Yes. Seeing Zhang Qingguang's signal, Bai Mu hurriedly stepped forward and respectfully took the 5-element bead in his hand. However, when the 5-element bead entered Bai Mu's hand, there was no change at first. After waiting for a while, a dark brown mist formed in the center of the bead, and then quickly spread toward the walls of the bead. However, before the mist reached half of the bead, a faint green mist appeared and mixed in with the dark brown mist. Although there wasn't much of it, it was very obvious. Sigh, Bai Mu has an earth and wood constitution. Xiang Min sighed and took the 5-element bead. She said, Because there are very few wood attributes, ordinary magic tools can't distinguish them. This 5-element bead is very sensitive to the 5 elements, and it has the power of a magic tool. Of course, it can distinguish them. Then, she glanced at the 5-element disc in the air and explained. Although Bai Mu only has a small amount of wood attributes in his body, the formations control technique is only effective on earth attribute spiritual qi of heaven and earth. When he inhales earth attribute spiritual qi of heaven and earth, he will naturally become sluggish. This way, he won't be able to control the earth attribute formation core. What should we do now? Zhang Qingguang was instantly stupefied. Not only him, but Jingyi and the others were also stunned. Which fellow Taoist disciple has an earth attribute? Xiang Min shouted anxiously. But after shouting a few times, no one answered. They didn't have many disciples with them, So who would think of having a 5-element physique? Even Xiangmin and the others didn't think of bringing 2 spares. Xiangmin looked at everyone looking at each other, and could only say, "Sigh, if it really doesn't work, then we can only be the formation core." "Fine." Jinyi nodded. "This formation is related to the success or failure of killing the 2 beasts. If we can trap the 2 beasts in the 5-element formation, we'll be far stronger than a golden core cultivator." However, after Jinyi finished speaking, the 7 golden core cultivators looked at each other. Unexpectedly, none of them walked out. None of the 7 golden core cultivators had an earth attribute physique. "It can't be!" Xiangmin was dumbfounded. Yes, earth attribute physique was the most common attribute in the cultivation world. Perhaps 5 out of 10 cultivators had an earth attribute physique. Moreover, earth attribute physique was even more common in the entire Dawn Rain continent. Almost all of the secular people had an earth attribute physique. However, it was precisely because earth attribute physique was common that their aptitudes were slightly lower. Those who could cultivate to foundation establishment, or golden core realm, were fewer than those with the other 4 attributes. "Damn it!" Jinyi slapped his thigh and laughed. "I really wish I had an earth attribute physique right now." Jinyi was joking. Lightning attribute physique was rare in the entire Dawn Rain continent. Its cultivation speed was much faster than the usual 5-element physique. Moreover, the Imperial Thunder Sect's magic arts were most beneficial for lightning attribute cultivators. How could he neglect the essentials and focus on the trifles? "Sigh, I'm afraid I have to make a trip back to the sect." Xiangmin looked at everyone and asked, "Which fellow Taoist is willing to make a trip back? I have to preside over the formation and can't be delayed." However, now that things had come to this, who would want to go back? If he left and someone else coincidentally came, the formation would be completed and the 2 beasts would be killed. Wouldn't they lose their inner cores? Xiangmin knew what everyone was thinking and could only say, "Why don't any fellow Taoists send a disciple back, or send a message to Western Huang Town's transportation formation? Fellow Taoist Feng, your Huangnao sect seems to be the closest to Western Huang Town, right?" Jinyi thought for a moment and smiled. "Why don't we ask fellow Taoist Feng's disciple to make a trip back? Your Imperial Thunder sect isn't too far away, right? Why can't Imperial Thunder sect's disciples make a trip back?" Feng Shuiqing smiled coldly. Jinyi spread his hands. "My Imperial Thunder sect only accepts lightning and fire attribute physiques. We don't accept earth attribute disciples." Feng Shuiqing was speechless. He pointed at Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua isn't lightning or fire attribute. What attribute does he have?" "I'm not sure about that." "He definitely isn't earth attribute." Jinyi smiled. "Humph." Feng Shuiqing pointed. "Whether he's earth attribute or not, can't we just test it with the 5-element pearl?" "Then let's test it. What's there to be afraid of? If he's earth attribute, I'd be happy," Jinyi said without a care. -8. Chapter 1889. Hearing their argument, Xiaohua looked at the 5-elemental bead and thought of the lightning-controlling sect's mirror spirit. He smiled apologetically and said, "Seniors, please don't argue. I have the fire attribute. At most, I have other attributes mixed in. In short, I'm not suitable for the fire array core, let alone the earth array core." "Humph. I want to see what kind of constitution you have today." Feng Shuiqing stared at Xiaohua. Xiaohua was helpless. He didn't dare to talk back and could only look at Jinyi. He. Jinyi smiled and said, "If Xiaohua doesn't have the earth attribute, will fellow Taoist Feng send your disciples back to find someone with the earth attribute?" Jinyi thought he could force Feng Shuiqing to agree, but Feng Shuiqing waved her hand and said, "That's different. I won't fall for that." "Then don't let my lightning-controlling sect's disciples test their constitution," Jinyi said coldly. Forget it. Fellow Taoists, please don't argue. Although my Xuyuan school isn't close, it's not far. I'll send my disciples back," Jian Zhuchen quickly persuaded. fellow Taoist Jiang, you can't say that. Feng Shuqing shook her head and said, the lightning controlling sect said they don't have any disciples with the earth attribute, but this disciple's constitution hasn't been confirmed yet. Who knows? If he doesn't, fellow Taoist Jiang can send people. If he does, won't we have less trouble? Fellow Taoist Feng, are you done? Jinyi was furious. Yes, I am. So what? Feng Shuqing also said angrily. Fellow Taoists, Xiangmin said, let's not argue. We're all golden core cultivators who are hundreds of years old. It won't look good in front of our disciples. As half the person in charge, I'll give you a suggestion. Xiaohua has already seen the fire array core's control technique. If he really has the earth attribute, it'll be easier for him to learn. Don't talk about finding someone else to train. So, Xiaohua, let's test it first. If it doesn't work, we'll find someone else. No. Jinyi shook his head and said with a smile. It's not that I don't want to give fellow Taoist Xiang face, but the lightning controlling sect's disciples' constitution testing sects matter. Outsiders have no reason to interfere. Xiangmin's face suddenly turned gloomy. How about this? Grandmaster Jin, disciple has a way. Xiaohua saw that the situation was not good and took the opportunity to say, you have no right to speak here. Feng Shuqing glared at him. Jinyi originally didn't want Xiaohua to speak, but since Feng Baiqing said so, he just smiled and said, if you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to listen to other people's words. Yes. Disciple has thought about it. Disciple doesn't need to test any attributes. Disciple only needs to see the technique to control the earth formation core. Disciple will know soon after I try it. This way, disciple will follow martial ancestors' instructions and also follow Senior Feng's instructions to know whether or not I have the earth attribute. Xiaohua said with a smile. Great! Jiang Zhuqing and the others immediately clapped and said, that's how it should be. However, Xiangmin wasn't too happy. Wasn't it obvious that they wanted to see how he controlled the earth formation core? After pondering for a moment, Xiangmin clapped her hands and took out a jade slip and said, Kid, you really have a lot of wicked ideas. Remember your hard oath, you can't spread this kind of thing outside. Junior understands. Xiaohua was secretly happy and thought, isn't this also counted as a fisherman taking advantage of the situation? At the side, Jinyi glanced at Feng Shuqing, and Feng Shuqing also looked at him coldly. After only half a day, Xiaohua finished reading the jade slip. He closed his eyes and recalled for a moment, then returned the jade slip to Xiangmin. When Xiangmin flew into the air, she pointed her hand. The dark brown dot of light appeared between red, blue, yellow, and green. Then, it gradually expanded until it stood on equal footing with the other four lights. Xiaohua also activated the Earth Attribute Magic Treasure and guided the Earth Attribute Spiritual Energy into it according to the method to control it. Then, he poured it into the Magic Treasure. There's a problem! Xiaohua was originally looking forward to the obscure and even sluggish appearance of the wings. Who would have thought that the Earth Attribute Spiritual Energy would slightly flow in his body without any obstruction and smoothly pass through under the control of the Heart Sutra? Whoosh! A dark brown brilliance immediately connected the 5-element disc and the Earth Attribute Magic Treasure together. It was as solid as the other 4 light belts. Great! Xiangmin was overjoyed. She pointed her hand, and the 5-colored 5-element disc that had just stopped spinning began to spin again. Moreover, as Xiangmin poured in the spell, it continued to accelerate. What's going on? Xiaohua was stunned. He was almost stupefied as he operated the Heart Sutra. He extracted the little Earth Attribute spiritual energy from the air and sent it into the magic treasure. I originally had a Fire Attribute physique. How did it become Earth Attribute? Xiaohua suddenly remembered the obscure true energy when he practiced the Prairie Fire Heart Sutra. Buzz buzz! A series of noises pulled Xiaohua out of his thoughts. He saw the 5-element disc making noises in the air. It was spinning so fast that it was almost impossible to see its shape. The 5 light belts that connected the magic treasure also gradually changed from thin strips to wide strips. Then, they gradually expanded until finally, they covered the entire valley. Quick! Xiangmin shouted in the air. The 5-element disc suddenly stopped spinning. The 5-colored brilliance on the disc also suddenly scattered into a ball. The 5-colored brilliance mixed together, and gradually became turbid. Then, it slowly became clear until finally, it became transparent. It revealed a 5-element disc that seemed to have not moved at all. At the same time, the brilliance of the formation in the valley also overlapped. It was similarly turbid and clear until finally, it became transparent. An intact valley was revealed. However, Xiaohua's group of 5 who were originally sitting cross-legged in the valley, and Xiangmin who was in the air, had all disappeared. Fellow Taoists, please enter the formation. According to the records in the Jade Slip, familiarize yourself with the formation. Xiangmin's voice sounded in the air. Jin Yi and the others scanned the area with their divine senses. Not only were there no traces of Xiaohua and the others, even the origin of Xiangmin's voice was not the slightest bit strange. Jin Yi and the others were slightly shocked. Soon after, they all flew to different parts of the Great Formation. After entering the Great Formation, they also disappeared. Husband, this 5-element formation is indeed powerful, Yan Qinglian whispered to Xiangyang after scanning with her divine sense. And Xiangyang seemed to be somewhat absent-minded as he said, "This is the Great Formation that the 5-element sect specializes in. If we ignore it, how would Senior Xiang dare to take it out?" Husband, Yan Qinglian whispered. "What's wrong?" Sigh. Xianyang transmitted his voice. "Junior brother Xiao, why is there a difference in his constitution? From the looks of it, he clearly has an earth attribute constitution. This? If Master were to know about it, then what would happen?" Sigh, that's true. Yan Qinglian also had a worried look on her face. Junior brother Xiao is kind-hearted and honest. He is the little junior brother in my heart. However, he can't build his foundation and doesn't gain Master's favor. Now, not to mention not building his foundation, even if he builds his foundation, he may not be able to stand in front of junior brother Cui. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Calm to vote for it. -8. Chapter 1890. Being unable to stand before junior martial brother Cui is still a small matter, Xiangyang said. Junior martial brother Xiao isn't favored by Master. If his constitution isn't of the fire attribute, wouldn't he be expelled by Master? And junior martial brother Zhao's divine ability is really powerful. He can kill Foundation Establishment cultivators before reaching Foundation Establishment. How powerful will he be after reaching Foundation Establishment? I don't dare to imagine. You said he and Master. No way. Yan Qinglian was also dumbfounded at this time. She never thought about it. After all, one was Master and the other was disciple. There was nothing to compare. But now that Xiangyang said it, she immediately woke up. Xiaohua could kill Foundation Establishment cultivators before reaching Foundation Establishment. What if he reached Foundation Establishment? Wouldn't he be able to kill late Foundation Establishment cultivators? But what cultivation level? It's only late Foundation Establishment cultivators, right? He hasn't even reached peak Foundation Establishment. But Yan Qinglian still firmly shook her head. Junior martial brother isn't that kind of person. Yes, I also think so. Xianyang smiled bitterly. But what about Master? Thinking about the helplessness of a strict father, Xianyang felt a sense of powerlessness. It wasn't that he didn't want to teach his disciple, it was just that he was too earnest and too strict. If he knew about Xiaohua's change, who knows what he would do? Expelling him from the Imperial Thunder Sect wasn't impossible. Husband, you should think about it again. Yan Qinglian also said powerlessly to Xianyang. Xianyang felt a headache coming on. He already knew too many of Xiaohua's secrets, but he didn't know these secrets. He really didn't know whether he should tell Master or not. Glancing at Shui Shui, who only had concern on her face, Xiang Yang sighed. His gaze fell on the 5 elements soul-capturing formation that had changed again. At this time, inside the 5 elements soul-capturing formation, the figures of Xiaohua and the others were still nowhere to be seen. However, Xin Yi and the other golden core cultivators had already appeared. Each of them flew in the air, forming seals with their hands, releasing their divine senses and carefully comprehending the changes in the formation. Their figures were also constantly flying, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Xiaohua, who was the eye of the earth formation, was sitting cross-legged on the eye of the formation. The earth-type magic treasure was constantly extracting spiritual energy from his body. This spiritual energy was just extracted by Xiaohua from the valley. It wasn't refined and was directly used by the magic treasure. At this moment, Xiaohua's heart was even more tangled than Xiang Yang's. Although the mental cultivation method in his body was unceasingly flowing, he was thinking a lot in his heart. The bone refinement of the 7 colors is for escape. The first layer was to use the fire essence flame crystal to temper the body. Of course, it was fire. Only by using the fire essence flame crystal could the body be tempered to perfection. Therefore, the first layer of bone tempering should be fire. After the fire, it should be earth. Presumably, the color of my bones should have changed, and my body's attributes should have changed to earth. Damn it, this young master has never heard of a cultivator who can change their body's attribute. It is precisely because this young master already has an earth attribute physique that the prairie fire mental cultivation technique is somewhat obscure when refining the heaven and earth's spiritual energy. This 5 elements sex 5 elements formation also has a problem in controlling the fire attribute's spiritual energy. When he thought of this, Xiaohua was immediately overjoyed. Since it's an earth attribute physique, then there's no need for the fire essence flame crystal. I also don't need to search for it in the flame forest swamp. Isn't there an earth crystal yao milk in the space? It should be used. I just don't know if Sun Shu's method of using it will work. The earth attribute spiritual energy is already insufficient. I'll use my magic power to supply it. Xiaohua suddenly felt that the formation was strange. Without thinking, he poured his magic power into the magic treasure. After the magic treasure received Xiaohua's magic power, it immediately returned to its original state. It unhurriedly absorbed the magic power, emitting a dark brown brilliance. Seeing that Xiaohua's magic power had been depleted by more than 30%, Xiaohua began to turn his eyes, gradually reducing his magic power. After half a cup of tea's time, all of his magic power was isolated. The light of the earth attribute magic treasure above Xiaohua's head disappeared, and it immediately fell to the ground. Immediately, the entire 5 elements soul-capturing formation was broken, and everyone's figures were revealed. Looking at the other cultivators on the other 4 formation cores, although their complexions were not as pale as Xiaohua's, they were not looking good either. Especially Qing Hao, her forehead was covered in sweat. Clearly, she could not hold on any longer. Good! Xiang Min's figure landed, and she clapped her hands with a smile. I didn't expect the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples' cultivation to be so profound. Although he has not broken through to the Foundation Establishment realm, he is still at the Qi Refinement realm. Unexpectedly, he has persisted for so long. Fellow Taoist Jin, if nothing unexpected happens, your 2 portions of Lightning Beast's inner core should be fine. Fellow Taoist Xiang's words are wrong. That portion of inner core is Xiaohua's. It has nothing to do with this old man. Jin Yi looked at the pale Xiaohua, who was paralyzed on the ground, and said with satisfaction, Fellow Taoists, take a rest first. When Xiaohua recovers his magic power, we will let him lure the fire ape. Xiang Min said with a smile. Jin Yi seemed to have thought of something and asked, Fellow Taoist Xiang, according to Xiaohua, he has 2 methods to lure the fire ape. One is to go to the fire ape's vicinity based on his perception, and the other is to stay in place with less certainty. Oh! Xiang Min was startled, and she said with a frown, I need time to set up the formation. If Xiaohua goes out to lure the fire ape, how can this formation be formed? It's better to use the second method. Although the certainty is low, it can still lure the fire ape, right? Xiaohua collapsed on the ground and said in a low voice. He was secretly complaining in his heart. Jinyi didn't say anything else. He walked in front of Xiaohua and transmitted his voice. What's up with the attribute of your physique? Disciple. Disciple has the hidden fire attribute, and there's also the earth attribute mixed in. Xiaohua scratched his head with difficulty and said, As for the specifics, I'm afraid only the 5 Elements sect can explain it clearly. And Jinyi nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Hurry up and consume the elixir to recover your magic power. Later, we still have to think of a way to lure the fire ape. But Xiaohua was about to say something, but he was forced back by Jinye's sharp gaze. Sigh, I'll just take it one step at a time. Only now did Xiaohua understand the legendary saying of driving a duck to a perch. 100 miles away from Xiaohua, in the rather large underground cave under the fire lake, there were a few cultivators at the corner of the altar who were methodically repairing the formation. The other spirit husbandry sect disciples had already left long ago. However, they didn't go far away. Instead, they sat cross-legged around the altar, each holding a jade slip in their hands. Their brows were slightly furrowed, as if they were comprehending something. The contents of the jade slip were none other than the spirit-devouring cultivation method that the spirit husbandry sect elder Yuan Feng had asked his disciples to distribute. Of course, what the disciples were comprehending was extremely simple. Even so, it was still extremely difficult to comprehend from the expressions of the cultivators. A soft pa sound was heard. It seemed like a stone had fallen to the ground, but it also seemed like a mechanism had closed. Then, on the altar, a foundation establishment disciple who was following behind a few chi refinement disciples shouted in a low voice. Stop! How could those chi refinement disciples not know that the formation had been completed? Even if this foundation establishment disciple didn't say anything, they would have stopped anyway. However, this foundation establishment disciple cautiously immersed his divine sense into the jade slip again. After looking at it for a moment, he slowly cast a spell that had been brewing for a long time. Wang! A soft sound was heard, and the area below this cultivator shone with a faint brilliance. Then, it was extinguished. Following the extinguishment of the brilliance, an even denser brilliance appeared in this area and rapidly spread across the entire altar. It's done! This foundation establishment cultivator's eyes were filled with joy. However, before he could fly out of the altar, rumble, rumble, rumble. After a few loud tremors, the atmosphere on the altar became slightly tense. Not only was there a large amount of dust rising from the altar, even the entire ground was shaking non-stop. This commotion obviously attracted the attention of the spirit husbandry sect disciples who were resting around the altar. All of them flew up in fright. However, just as they leaped into the air, the brilliance on the altar suddenly disappeared. The tremors stopped, and the entire underground space became silent. Yuan Feng, Zhe Qiping, Man Yun, and Hu Yu were the 4 spirit husbandry sect elders in the later stage of the Golden Core realm. Naturally, they were also attracted by the commotion and flew above the altar. Greetings to the 4 elders! The foundation establishment disciple who was the last to repair the spell formation bowed hurriedly. Not bad. Go and rest. Comprehend the mental cultivation method that I imparted to you earlier. Yuan Feng smiled and waved his hand. There will be a great opportunity for you in a few days. Thank you, Elder Yuan. The cultivator's face was filled with gratitude. He brought a few chi refinement disciples and hurriedly landed at the side of the altar. He took out the jade slip and hurriedly comprehended it. At this moment, Zhe Qiping and the others were no longer bothered by Yuan Feng's arbitrary actions. Instead, they looked at the frightened disciples beside the altar and scolded. There's not much time left. What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear Elder Yuan's reminder? If you can't comprehend the mental cultivation method, you will be the ones at a disadvantage in front of the great opportunity. Yes, the disciples with status bowed and instructed the disciples on the left to descend and comprehend the mental cultivation method. Elder Yuan, look at the spell formation. Compare it to the jade slip in our hands. It should have been repaired. Hu Yu scanned the altar with his divine sense and said in a low voice, "But the incomplete part in the jade slip. We still can't find it. This 5 essences spirit awakening spell formation is also incomplete. It doesn't matter. As far as I know, since the spell formation has already reacted, it should be able to be activated." Yuan Feng smiled. "Moreover, we can't completely crack the spell formation. We only need to open a small gap in the 5 essences spirit awakening spell formation and release some of the Chao Chi's soul for us to use." "Fine." Man Yun's eyes flashed fiercely. "There's never anything in this world that is completely certain. If we always shrink back, how can we achieve nascent soul? I will listen to Elder Yuan's arrangement. I will also follow." Zhe Qiping and Hu Yu had already comprehended the spell formation and spirit awakening mental cultivation method. They knew that there were many benefits, so they both gritted their teeth and nodded. "Great." Yuan Feng clapped his hands and said, "In that case, let's begin. We will listen to Elder Yuan's orders." The 3 people cupped their hands and said, "Bring the 5 spirits up." Yuan Feng ordered. On the other side of the stone wall of the altar, 5 early-stage gold core cultivators flew down from the 5 different caves. There were 3 men and 2 women, and each of them held a spiritual storage bag in their hands. There were many talismans on the spiritual storage bags. -8. Chapter 1891. The 5 cultivators flew to the 4 elders and bowed. Yuan Feng nodded and said, "Go back to your positions as I said before." "Yes." The 5 of them replied in unison. Then, they scattered and flew to 5 different places on the altar. When they landed, they were at the 5 points of the pentagram on the altar. At the 5 points of the pentagram, there were 5 small formations. In the center of each formation, there was a small Chao Wu pattern. "Elders, please return to the cave. I will activate the array here. If there is any problem, I will ask the elders for help." Yuan Feng smiled and said to the other 3, "And we will go back first and watch from the side. Elder Yuan has worked hard. It will take 5 days and 5 nights to activate this array. If there is anything wrong, call us immediately." Man Yun and the others cupped their hands and flew back to the cave. After the 3 of them flew away, Yuan Feng patted his hand and took out a small triangular flag from the storage bag. The flag was 5-colored, and each of the 5 colors had 5 spirit beasts bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws. It was very ferocious. "Go!" Yuan Feng channeled his spiritual power, and the small flag flew into the air above the altar. Yuan Feng chanted a mysterious chant, and the spell in his hand continued to enter the small flag. The small flag grew bigger and bigger under the infusion of spiritual power. In about the time it took to eat a meal, it became a 10-feet flag. At this time, the 5 spirit beasts on the small flag were also revealed. The first one was a green dragon. Its long body swam slightly on the flag. Its 2 dragon eyes revealed a ferocious light, and its 4 dragon claws also flashed with a sharp light. The second one was a white tiger. It was flying in the air in a pouncing posture. Its bloody mouth made people feel fear at first sight. The third one was a vermilion bird. Its fiery red feathers were like burning flames, and its small body exuded a ferocity not inferior to the white tiger. The fourth one was a black tortoise. Under the pitch-black tortoise shell, a triangular head poked out slightly. Its slightly open mouth was actually a scarlet snake tongue. The fifth one was a qilin. A strange beast with the body of a moose, the tail of an ox, the hooves of a horse, and the skin of a fish stepped on the auspicious cloud. There was a faint yellow light on its forehead. 5 spirit flags. When Man Yun saw the 5 spirit beasts suddenly awaken, he was extremely shocked. Zhi sighed and said, "Elder Yuan." Sure enough, he already planned this. He even found the legendary 5 spirit flags. Puyu looked at the 5 golden cord disciples on the altar and asked curiously, "Could it be that the 5 disciples are holding the 5 spiritual beasts?" "Haha, I definitely don't believe that." Zhiping smiled and shook his head. "The 5 spirit flags are inanimate objects. Although they've been missing for a long time, it's normal for them to be found. The 5 spirit beasts are demonic beasts, even legendary saint beasts. How could they be something we can covet? I'm afraid these 5 storage bags contain spirit beasts with the bloodlines of the 5 spiritual beasts." Just as they were talking, Yuan Feng scolded, "Where is the Azure Dragon?" This soft voice resounded throughout the entire underground space. The low-level disciples of the spirit husbandry sect who didn't know what the Azure Dragon represented all stood up in shock. As disciples of the spirit husbandry sect, how could they not know what the Azure Dragon represented? Although the Taiching sect had a python dragon that protected the mountain, it was still a dragon born from a python. Its roots were still pythons and not dragons. The Azure Dragon was the king of dragons, a divine dragon among dragons. It was definitely not something an ordinary dragon could compare to. Now that the elder of the spirit husbandry sect had actually called out the Azure Dragon, the early-stage golden core cultivator at the corner of the altar also trembled. He clapped his hands and didn't rush to take out his storage bag. Instead, he activated his magic treasure in the air to protect himself. How could these disciples not be tempted? They all widened their eyes and stared at the cultivator. They wanted to see what the legendary Azure Dragon looked like. The early-stage golden core cultivator was ready. He slapped his hand, and the numerous talismans outside his spirit storage bag fell off, turning into specks of light that fell into his hand. Only then did he lightly shake his spirit storage bag, and a small green python flew out from the spirit storage bag. This green python was about the size of a thumb, and had a body that was more than a foot long. There was a sarcoma on its head that looked like a crown. Moreover, there was a thin strand of golden thread on the green python's body, which was quite eye-catching. This is the Green Python King!" A disciple cried out in surprise. His voice was very clear in the quiet space. Instantly, the disciple came to his senses. His face and ears turned red, and he lowered his head without saying a word. The few disciples at the side glanced at him. Although there was some contempt in their eyes, they didn't show any disdain when they saw that he was an Chi refinement disciple. After all, green pythons were extremely poisonous. This Green Python King was definitely not something an Chi refinement disciple could deal with. However, following the disciple's cry of surprise, a trace of disappointment emerged in everyone's hearts. They all thought at the same time, "So, this isn't the Azure Dragon?" "Yes, although it's not the Azure Dragon, green pythons have the bloodline of dragons. The Green Python King can be called the King of Pythons." Inside the cave, Zhiping nodded slightly. "How strange!" Huyu frowned and said, "I remember. The green pythons in the Liqian mountain range never had a python king. How did a green python king appear out of thin air?" Hee, Liqian mountain range isn't the only place with a green python king, right?" Mannion said with a smile. "Elder Yuan has been planning for over 100 years. Who knows where he got a green python king with the bloodline of dragons?" While the three of them were discussing, the viridescent python king was already floating in the air above the altar. Although the viridescent python king seemed to be sleeping, the golden core cultivator didn't dare to be careless. He cast a few sealing spells and fixed the viridescent python king on the small array pattern above the altar. Immediately after, Yuan Feng, who was in midair, slapped his palm on his chest. With a pu sound, a mouthful of blood essence sprayed onto the 5 spirit flag, covering the Azure Dragon. A dragon's roar resounded through the air from the 5 spirit flag. A faint azure light flew out from the flag. Following the direction of Yuan Feng's spell, it flew towards the green python king curled up on top of the formation. At the same time, the gold core cultivator sitting cross-legged on the left side of the viridescent python king opened his mouth and spat out a tiny black iron needle. That black iron needle was much smaller than Xiaohua's. But looking at the cold brilliance of the tip of the needle, it was actually much sharper. Go! Following the golden core cultivator's soft command, the black iron needle pierced into the sarcoma on top of the green python king's head like lightning. With the SI sound, azure blood sprayed out from the black iron needle. This black iron needle was actually hollow. At the same time, the azure dragon's shadow flew to the top of the green python king's head and sucked in all the azure blood without leaving a single drop behind. The green python king was in pain, and its entire body twisted rapidly. Several rays of brilliance appeared on its body. It was the brilliance of the restrictive spell that the golden core had absorbed. With a few pa sounds, the binding spell of the golden core cultivator was actually broken. Following which, the green python king quickly turned around and bit towards the golden core cultivator on the left. -8. Chapter 1892. With a soft hiss, the golden core cultivator's protective brilliance blocked the viridescent python king. But immediately after, a wisp of pitch-black venom appeared and burned the brilliance. The brilliance immediately dimmed. It had actually been destroyed by the viridescent python king. The early golden core cultivator panicked. It wasn't that he didn't have any methods to deal with the python king, but he had received Yuan Feng's orders and couldn't use any spells. He could only passively defend. At this moment, the azure dragon shadow that had absorbed the python king's blood had turned into a blood shadow. It was like a real azure dragon. It roared again and charged toward the python king. When the python king heard the commotion, it was immediately enveloped by the azure dragon shadow's indescribable pressure. Although it was a bit angry, its entire body was trembling as if it was afraid. The azure dragon blood shadow didn't stop at all. It directly rushed to the front of the viridescent python king and flew towards it. The python king was clearly staking everything. It bounced up and bit toward the azure dragon shadow. Unfortunately, the blood shadow was only a shadow. The python king only bit empty air. At this moment, the azure dragon shadow had already rushed into the python king's body and passed through it. Gigi, the python king let out a mournful cry as if its soul had been sucked out. After it cried out, its entire body fell from the sky and stopped moving. Roar! The azure dragon shadow became even more vivid and was about to solidify. Go! Yuan Feng stood in the air and was overjoyed. He pointed with his hand and a ray of light flew out from the 5 spirit flags and landed on the formation under the azure dragon's blood shadow. With a rumbling sound, the small formation began to shake and green light overflowed. The entire small formation gradually began to emit a gentle green light. When the entire formation was completely filled with green light, the Chao Wu pattern on the formation gradually faded until it finally disappeared. A small hole appeared, and it was precisely where the bloody mouth on the Chao Wu pattern was. As the hole appeared, a suction force appeared. The azure dragon shadow circled in the air for a moment before it fell into the hole with a whoosh. As the azure dragon blood shadow entered, the hole also disappeared. Then, the entire small magic array protruded from the altar and began to rotate on its own. This rotation lasted for a day and a night, until it finally turned into a sparkling and translucent azure dragon. 5 Skanda's awakening formation. These 5 accumulations, could they be the 5 spirits? Huyu looked at the array formations changes and said somewhat pensively, I'm afraid so. Man Yun pointed his finger and said, Look at that green dragon. Although it looks crystal clear to the naked eye, it's actually very complicated in spiritual sense. This yin probably means to contain spirit, right? If you really use the azure dragon's bloodline and soul, then this formation would naturally be pure. Yes, it would even be transparent, Zhi Qiping said thoughtfully. But if that's the case, I'm afraid, even Mahayana cultivators can do it, right? That's right, even spirit severing stage and body integration stage cultivators can't do that. Man Yun nodded without hesitation, then frowned and said, Elder Yuan has exhausted a lot of energy. Before Man Yun could finish, Huyu shook his head and said, No need. Elder Yuan is already consuming pills to recover his spiritual power. We're not as proficient in formations as Elder Yuan, and we haven't refined the 5 spirit flags. Let's not disturb him. Fine. Man Yun looked at Zhe and Qi Ping with complicated expressions. After Yuan Feng finished resting, he ordered another disciple to activate the formation where the white tiger was. Naturally, the white tiger within this disciple's storage bag was not a real white tiger. However, it was a real white spirit tiger. Just like the green python king, it was sleeping in the spirit storage bag and would only wake up when its blood was extracted. Naturally, the white spirit tiger's soul was also extremely easy to capture by the white tiger's blood shadow. Another day and night passed before the white tiger blood shadow rushed into Chao Yu's mouth. The formation in the shape of a white tiger also protruded out. It was crystal clear as it cooperated with the green dragon. At this time, Yuan Feng had consumed more than 80% of his spiritual power. This was far beyond his expectations. He thought that as a late gold core cultivator, it would be more than enough for him to use 50% of his spiritual power to operate the formation. He didn't expect to consume so much spiritual power just to activate the 2 spirits. He had no choice but to once again look at the altar under his feet. On the altar, there were already 2 pieces of crystal, while the other 3 were still ordinary stones. A small part of the Chao Chen's figure had disappeared, but the Chao Chen's ferocious eyes and bared fangs faintly revealed a fierce aura. Shi Qiping and the others flew down from the cave and said with great concern, "Elder Yuan, let's take a rest." Yuan Feng thought for a moment and nodded. "I thought too little. I'll rest for half a day before setting up the formation." "Elder Yuan, please." The 3 of them invited Yuan Feng into the cave. The eyes of all the spirit husbandry sect disciples below the altar shone with excitement. They had already practiced the incomplete spirit devouring cultivation technique, and knew what they had to do. Naturally, they also knew that the Chao Chen's spirit essence was suppressed under the altar. Although there were very few legends about Chao Chen, it was easy to guess how strong the spirit essence was after seeing how Chao Chen used the 5 spirits to suppress it. Advance! This was the only thought in every spirit husbandry sect disciple's mind. Compared to the excitement of the spirit husbandry sect disciples, Xiaohua was unusually depressed. "What? You want to go outside the formation to lure the fire ape? You're not joking, right?" Xiangmin shrieked. "I've already told fellow Taoist Jin that as the Earth formation core, you can't leave. Otherwise, not only will the 5 elements soul capturing formation not be activated, but it will also collapse even if it is activated. If you want to use a magic weapon to lure the fire ape, you can only do it in the 5 elements formation." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. "But I don't have much confidence in doing it in the formation." "If you don't have confidence, you dare to speak nonsense? You dare to ask for the lightning beast's core from us?" Feng Shuqing was also unusually angry. No one would have thought that the most crucial part of the formation would have an anomaly. Of course, this anomaly was concealed by Jinyi. "Sai, since you can't go out and lure the fire ape, Xiaohua, you can only stay in the formation." Jinyi sighed and said, "Not having much confidence is better than not having any confidence, right? It's better than not luring the fire ape over." Xiaohua was extremely helpless and could only smile apologetically. "Then, I can only try my best." "Humph," Xiangmin snorted coldly and flew into the air. Shui knew the reason, but she didn't dare to ask. She held Xiaohua's hand and said, "Darling Xiao, you have to be careful." "Yes, I know." At this moment, Xiaohua didn't dare to say that this was Jinye's idea. They were here because of Jinye's protection. Without Jinyi, Xiangmin and the others could casually kill them. How could Xiaohua dare to offend Jinyi? Xiangmin once again set up the 5 elements soul capturing formation. When everything was finished, Xiangmin said coldly in the air, "Xiaohua, let's see what you're capable of." "Yes, I understand." Xiaohua sat cross-legged on the earth formation core and slowly sent the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into the earth-type magic treasure. He answered casually and took out the sun-moon corona. All the cultivators were concerned about Xiaohua's methods. When the sun-moon corona was taken out, several divine senses swept over it. However, the sun-moon corona had already been refined by Xiaohua. Several divine senses couldn't see anything. They could only quietly wait for Xiaohua to make his move. Xiaohua closed his eyes and used his magic power to activate the sun-moon corona. Subsequently, the sun-moon corona gradually rose into the air. Then Xiaohua began to cast spells. One spell after another, the sun-moon corona began to emit a faint red light. After waiting for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the red light began to become dazzling and almost became a scorching sun. Thus, Xiaohua's perception gradually expanded along with the brilliance of this scorching sun. Naturally, Xiaohua's perception couldn't see anything else. All he knew was that within the range of his perception, there was no trace of the fire ape. Very quickly, half a day passed. The entire valley was silent. Foam Shuqing couldn't help but ask, "Xiaohua, what's the situation?" "Fellow Taoist Foam, don't worry," Jinyi said confidently. "Flame Forest Swamp is so big, who knows where the fire ape and the thunder beast are? If Xiaohua immediately lured the fire ape over, would we still need to give him a thunder beast's core?" Foam Shuqing was speechless. He only snorted coldly and said no more. What Jinyi said was reasonable, but if he were to extend the time by 6 days, no one would believe it. However, just when Xiang Min and the others couldn't hold it in any more and were about to change their expressions, a silent aura gradually rose from a place 100 miles away. It became more and more suffocating. But when it rose to a certain extent, it suddenly disappeared again. "Eh? This is..." Jin Yi and the other golden core cultivators all sensed it with extreme sensitivity. They looked in that direction with extreme puzzlement. "Fellow Taoist Zhang, the fire ape hasn't come yet. Can I trouble fellow Taoist to go and take a look?" Xiang Min was in charge of the formation and couldn't leave. She raised her voice and instructed. "And this Zhang will go over now." Zhang Qingguang nodded and leaped into midair. But just as his figure was about to fly, he heard Xiaohua say loudly, "Seniors, I've lured that fire ape over, and it's already not far from here." "Ah?" Xiang Min was stunned and then laughed loudly. "Ha ha ha, the heavens are helping me. Fellow Taoist Zhang, don't go. Stay where you are." Zhang Qingguang didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly landed and entered the 5 elements formation. But the current Xiaohua didn't have any joy. Instead, he was secretly anxious. "What do you think?" Xiaohua really sensed the fire ape's trace through the sun-moon corona. There was no doubt about it. But the fire ape's direction wasn't towards them. Instead, it was towards the place where the aura burst out just now. Although that place was 100 miles away from the valley, the fire ape wouldn't pass by here. "What should I do?" Xiaohua's mind raced. Then, he clenched his teeth and used his magic power to raise the sun-moon corona into the sky. As the sun-moon corona rose, Xiaohua actually used his magic power to attack the restriction inside the sun-moon corona. -8. Chapter 1893. An hour later, the sun-moon corona gradually descended. Its brilliance also weakened as it slowly landed on the ground in front of Xiaohua. Looking at the mountain range in the distance, a fire ape that was several feet tall appeared. Its body was covered in flames. The fire ape's ferocious gaze was filled with doubt. As it flew, it turned its head left and right, looking into the distance and peeping into the valley. It was hesitant and puzzled. When the fire ape saw Xian Yang and the other cultivators sitting cross-legged in the valley and the sun-moon corona in the array, it couldn't help but roar in joy. The flames on its body surged and a merciless pressure rushed over, covering the entire valley. Jie, a thunderous sound came from a distance away from the fire ape. The fire ape actually stopped its descending body and obediently stayed in the air, waiting behind it with its hands hanging down. A few miles behind the fire ape, another pitch-black spirit beast that was about 6 meters tall was flying over. Hundreds of miles below the fire lake, on the altar in the space, Elder Yuan had finished resting. He flew into the air again and raised the 5 spirit flags. He chanted, "Vermilion bird." The third disciple patted his storage bag and a fire crow floated out. Like the previous spirit beast, this fire crow was also unconscious. Eh? Shock appeared on the faces of the spirit husbandry sect disciples who were watching. The fire crow was an ordinary spirit beast and was a far cry from the vermilion bird of the 5 spirit beasts. The disciples didn't expect this thing to come out. However, before they could exclaim in shock, the disciples who were watching had already noticed that something was amiss. A faint red line emerged from the fire crow's beak and passed through the fire crow's abdomen. It then appeared from the fire crow's tail and passed through its back. It then landed on the fire crow's forehead and connected with the red line on its beak. Seeing such a strange scene, everyone was enlightened. This fire crow was definitely not an ordinary spirit beast. Sure enough, as Elder Yuan cast his spell, fiery red blood seeped out of the fire crow's forehead. The blood was so hot that one could almost see the flames contained within it. The blood shadow of the vermilion bird was also covered in flames. It was even more vivid than the previous 2 blood shadows. Similarly, after a day and night, when the vermilion bird formation had become a sparkling and translucent piece, Hu exclaimed in shock, "Elder man, the bloodline of this fire crow is actually so pure. The formation in the spiritual sense is much more transparent than the previous 2. Yes, that's right. This fire crow was probably found by Elder Yuan in the Flame Forest Swamp, right?" Man Yun nodded and said, "The vermilion bird is of the fire attribute. Since the Flame Forest Swamp is so hot, there must be a continuation of its bloodline. Furthermore, it is easier to stimulate the vermilion bird's bloodline in the Flame Forest Swamp compared to the other 4 spirits." After that, Elder Yuan rested for a while and instructed the disciples to take out the spirit beast that was said to have the bloodline of the black tortoise. This time, as expected by the disciples of the spirit husbandry sect, a 3-foot-long black tortoise flew out of the storage bag. After another day and night, a black tortoise formation had formed into a crystal. At this moment, the bloodline of the 4 spirits had been injected into the altar of the 5 essences awakening formation. Although the bloodline of the black tortoise was extremely faint and the formation wasn't sparkling and translucent, it was still much brighter than before. Furthermore, it had formed the shape of a black tortoise, which made Elder Yuan break out in cold sweat. "Elder Yuan!" When Zhi Qiping and the others saw that Yuan Feng's complexion wasn't good, they landed once again and said, "Now that the 4 spirits have been refined, let's wait for another day for the last spirit. I'm afraid that Elder Yuan's magic power isn't enough now." Yuan Feng clapped his hands and took out a few spirit pills. He placed them in his mouth and smiled bitterly. "I originally had the same thoughts and plans. However, elders, look at these 5 spirit flags." Man Yun and the others looked up and saw that the azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise on the 5 spirit flags were much larger than before. They vaguely took up the entire 5 spirit flags, while the Qilin was squeezed into a corner, as if it was about to fall out of the flags. "Everyone, look at the altar again." Yuan Feng pointed. Man Yun and the others used their divine senses and saw that the 4 spirits' altars had merged together. There was a gap between the altars and the last stone altar. The gap was where the Chao Chi's bloody mouth was. This mouth vaguely emitted a vicious aura. "I'm afraid that time waits for no one." Zhi Qiping nodded slightly. 4 of the 5 spirits have already refined their bloodlines. If the last spirit isn't refined in time, the formation will change. "That's right." Yuan Feng nodded and smiled. "Elders, please return to the cave. I'll be done soon." "Elder Yuan, thank you for your hard work." The 3 knew that the arrow was already knocked on the bow and had to be fired. They could only cup their hands and fly into the cave. "Where's the Qilin?" Yuan Feng didn't dare to delay. He immediately shouted the moment he saw the 3 of them. The last golden cord disciple shook his storage bag. A scarlet spirit beast with a horn on its head that looked like a horse floated above the altar. "Unicorn! Unicorn?" The spirit husbandry sect disciples exclaimed again. This was a legendary spirit beast. Due to the unicorn's long and slender conch-like horn that could suppress devils, especially during cultivation, it could disperse otherworldly devils and heart devils. Therefore, every cultivator in Dawn Rain continent wanted to obtain a unicorn's horn. Therefore, the few remaining unicorns were all killed and the unicorns became legendary spirit beasts. No wonder the unicorn's horn can suppress devils! Hu Yu exclaimed. So this thing has the Qilin's bloodline. This? Shi Qiping was a little puzzled. I've been thinking about it. The other four spirits are easy to explain. Their bloodlines are almost all recorded. The only difference is the intensity of their bloodlines. But this Qilin's spirit, there's no record of it in my spirit husbandry sect. I really don't know where Elder Yuan got the record of this unicorn having the Qilin's bloodline. Yes, since Elder Yuan got the unicorn, you must be confident. A hint of admiration flashed across Man Yun's eyes. Let's wait and see, Hu Yu said softly. Then, the 5 spirit flag glowed. A Qilin phantom flew out and rushed into the blood extracted from the unicorn's body. Woo! The Qilin phantom trembled slightly as if it was uncomfortable and wanted to retreat from the blood. Quick! Yuan Feng was shocked. He pointed at the 5 spirits flag, and the flag vibrated, forcefully suppressing the Qilin blood shadow. Then, under Yuan Feng's control, the Qilin blood shadow extracted the soul of the unicorn. However, the Qilin blood shadow had changed shape, and it looked very similar to a unicorn. -8. Chapter 1894. This? Yuan Feng hesitated. It was obvious that the unicorn's bloodline was not the Qilin's bloodline, or perhaps its bloodline was extremely thin. Continue, or stop! Yuan Feng did not dare to use the spell that he was forming. The Qilin's blood shadow danced anxiously on the altar, as if it was afraid of the evil aura. Go! Thinking of the price he had to pay, Yuan Feng was unwilling to give up. He pointed his finger and used the spell. The Qilin's blood shadow flew into the mouth of the last spell formation. 1. The spell formation shook violently, and the stone's spell formation seemed to be lifted up. An indescribable aura and evil aura surged from the stone's spell formation, rising into the air. This aura was so fierce and so threatening that the disciples who were in the Qi refinement stage were forced to the ground. This is bad! Yuan Feng panicked. He changed the spell in his hand continuously, and his face was suffused with red light. Finally, Yuan Feng slapped his forehead, and a faint big hand appeared from the top of his head, grabbing at the stone's spell formation. The big hand landed on the spell formation, and a strong suction force was produced from the big hand. The Qilin's blood shadow that had rushed into the spell formation was actually pulled out by the big hand. Following the appearance of the Qilin's blood shadow, the spell formation immediately landed on the altar, and the soaring aura disappeared. Return! Yuan Feng shouted, and the big hand disappeared. The Qilin's blood shadow also shook, shaking off the unicorn's blood, and flew back into the 5 spirit flags. Elder Yuan! Seeing this, how could Man Yun and the rest still stay in the cave? They all flew down. Sigh, I am ashamed. Yuan Feng's pale face was filled with shame. I thought that I was infallible, and thought that the rare unicorn had the Qilin's bloodline, but such a big change occurred. I am really ashamed of what the 3 elders and the sect master have entrusted me with. Seeing that the spell formation had a problem at the last step, Man Yun and the rest were filled with regret. However, since Yuan Feng had done so much, how could they not comfort him? Everyone could only say something about how fate had yet to arrive, and that it was an ominous record. However, in the end, everyone fell silent. Only Hu Yu spoke of the knot in everyone's hearts. What kind of spiritual beast has the Qilin bloodline? Even Yuan Feng, who had studied the 5 skandhas awakening formation for over 100 years, didn't know about it. How could others know about it? Everyone looked at each other, not knowing how to guess. I'm afraid we'll have to wait for the next time. Man Yun was about to speak when all of a sudden, Yuan Feng's eyes lit up and he said anxiously, I know what spirit beast it is. What spiritual beast? Man Yun and the others were shocked as well, and they asked in unison. Earth-warding beast, Yuan Feng said resolutely. Dust-repelling beast? This isn't very possible, right? It seems to have nothing to do with the Qilin, Hu Yu said hesitantly. After all, the dust-warding beast was far from the legendary Qilin. Even if it isn't, it's almost the same. Yuan Feng was very agitated, and he said with some regret. The spell formation Jade Scroll mentioned the dust-warding beast many times, but I didn't think of that at all, really. As he spoke, he slapped his hand and took out a spirit storage bag from his waist. He called out to the disciple who had just released the unicorn and transmitted his voice to him. That disciple nodded vigorously and then flew to the stone wall. I'll rest for a while. Elders, please protect I. Yuan Feng slapped his hand and took out 4 pills of various colors. He put them in his mouth after taking a quick look at them, then he cupped his hands and said to Man Yun and the rest. Elder Yuan. Chichiping was a little hesitant, and he said, The pills that I took just now, haha, it's fine. It's already at the last moment. Even if I have to risk my life, I'll activate this spell formation and let the spiritual beasts of our spirit husbandry sect disciples evolve. Yuan Feng waved his hand and smiled, then he sat cross-legged in midair. Man Yun and the rest stood by Yuan Feng's side, forming a triangle on guard, afraid that the spell formation would change again. After the time it took to eat a meal, Yuan Feng's pale face gradually regained its redness. When the disciple who took the dust-repelling beast to deal with it returned, Yuan Feng also stood up in midair. How is it? Yuan Feng asked calmly. The golden cord disciple said respectfully. It's done according to Elder Yuan's instructions. It's no different from the unicorn from before. And go to the eye of the formation as usual, Yuan Feng instructed. When the golden cord disciple left, Hu Yu smiled. Elder Yuan, it's already late. Why don't you rest for another half a day? It's fine, you all can just watch from the sidelines. Yuan Feng shook his head. However, if we succeed this time, the spell formation will be activated. We'll act according to what we discussed earlier. All right. Man Yun and the rest looked at each other, and there was even more joy in their eyes. Yuan Feng flew under the 5-spirit flag again and slowly formed hand seals. When the image of the Qilin moved above the 5-spirit flag, Yuan Feng shouted again. Where's the Qilin? The golden cord disciple received the order and slapped his spirit storage bag. A dust-warding beast that had yet to mature flew out. Similarly, a black iron needle pierced the side of the dust-warding beast's horn. The Qilin image that flew over from the 5-spirit flag caught the crimson blood. With a tearing sound, the Qilin's blood image was formed instantly. However, this blood image wasn't as solid as before. Great! While Yuan Feng was delighted, all the spirit husbandry sect disciples below the altar cheered, and some of them forgot themselves. Yuan Feng smiled. After waiting for a while, he swept his gaze across the disciples, and all of them kept their joy. All of you are ready, Yuan Feng said softly. When the spell formation is activated, there will be the spirit essence of the spirit beasts flowing out. All of you can absorb it according to the instructions of the Heart Sutra. Helping your spirit beast is the same as helping yourself. Do you understand? We understand. Thank you, Elder Yuan, for fulfilling our wish. The disciples' voices were as loud as the mountains. Go! Yuan Feng changed his hand seal again and pointed his finger. The Qilin's blood image rushed into the spell formation. Rumble, many sounds could be heard. The last piece of the spell formation started to protrude slowly, and then it started to spin at an extremely fast speed. Yuan Feng injected his magic power. He thought that the spell formation would be the same as before, and he would need another day and night to refine it. However, just as his magic power entered the spell formation, a suction force appeared. Yuan Feng's magic power was like an unstoppable flood that was sucked into the spell formation. At this moment, the other 4 spirit spell formations also started to spin. As they also spun around the entire altar. Yuan Feng wanted to stop his magic power from being sucked out, but he didn't dare to. He could only clench his teeth and pour out his magic power. The magic power of a golden core late-stage cultivator was injected into the Qilin spell formation. In an instant, the spell formation started to become crystal clear. Furthermore, the moment the spell formation became crystal clear, the other 4 spell formations also started to change and gradually became transparent. However, the suction force didn't decrease. Instead, it became even stronger. "Elders, come and help me!" Yuan Feng obviously couldn't hold on any longer and hurriedly asked for help. Man Yun and the rest didn't dare to delay. They all flew over and injected their magic power into Yuan Feng's body, allowing the next spell formation to absorb it. Whoop! The 5 arrays cried out at the same time, and the 5 spirits also raised their heads and cried out. An aura soared into the sky, and a huge amount of 5 elemental spiritual chi also rushed out of the underground fire lake along with the aura. As the 5 elemental spiritual chi rushed out, the transparent 5 spirit spell formation suddenly flashed with a 5-colored brilliance. Then, a wisp of black gas appeared from the center of the spell formation. The moment the black gas appeared, it started to spin in a spiral and rushed out of the entire transparent spell formation. The entire spell formation started to turn turbid. In an instant, the 5 spell formations turned into 5 spiraling balls of gas. At this moment, the suction force of the spell formation also gradually disappeared. The magic power of the 4 golden core late-stage elders of spirit husbandry sect was completely sucked away. Yuan Feng and the other 3 hurriedly consumed pills to recover their dermic powers. Their eyes and spiritual senses covered the entire array again, waiting for the next change. However, at this moment, something strange happened again. A black and white light flashed, and an aura that soared into the sky pressed down. Suddenly, 5 strange cultivators appeared in the 5 clouds of Qi. In the valley, on the mountain range, the lightning beast that appeared had a human form. Its body was extremely black and covered with purplish-black scales. Each scale was the size of a palm, and between the scales, there were flashes of lightning. 2 wings that were dozens of feet in size swayed in the sky with purplish-black lightning. Looking at its face, it was indigo in color, and also covered with dense scales. Its 2 eyes were like golden bells that were protruding out of its head. Its mouth was a bird's beak that was sharp and protruding out. Its head was a ball of flame that was so bright that it dazzled everyone's eyes. This is the lightning beast? Xiaohua had never seen a lightning beast before, and when he saw it, he couldn't help but be astonished. It was far from what he had imagined. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The lightning beast opened its mouth, and a low rumble of thunder sounded. The fire ape seemed to be able to understand this rumble. It raised its head and roared, pointing at the sun-moon corona on the ground. The lightning beast also swept its spiritual will over, and Xiaohua could almost feel the brutality and cruelty in the spiritual will. As if they were negotiating something, the lightning beast and the fire ape kept making noises and moving their limbs. In the end, the lightning beast spread its wings and actually flew down, while the fire ape stopped in midair. "This is bad!" Xiaohua was shocked. He was worried for Xiang Yang and the rest who were sitting cross-legged in the spell formation. These Foundation establishment disciples couldn't be outside the spell formation. They could either hide far away or stay in the spell formation as bait. At this moment, the plans of the Golden Core stage cultivators were all wrong. Of the 2 beasts, only the lightning beast flew down. The fire ape didn't enter the trap. Obviously, if the lightning beast killed several people and took away the sun-moon corona, everyone's plan to ambush the 2 beasts would be ruined. At this moment, Xiaohua activated the sun-moon corona again. This object immediately emitted a faint red light, attracting the lightning beast's attention. The fire ape hesitated in midair for a moment, but in the end, it couldn't resist the temptation. The flames on its body flickered, and it flew down. To be continued. -8. Chapter 1895. Rumble! When the lightning beast sensed it, and was about to turn around and scold the fire ape, it heard Xiang Min's chuckle in midair. The 5-element plate that was hidden in midair suddenly appeared, and a 5-colored light barrier covered the fire ape and the lightning beast that were tailing it. Roar! The fire ape roared angrily, and the flames on its body suddenly erupted. Its entire body rushed up and grabbed at the 5-element plate that was in midair. However, just as the flames flew up to a height of about 10 feet, the 5-element plate in midair suddenly rotated. Then, like the Milky Way pouring down, a stream of water appeared out of thin air and covered the fire ape. Boom! The fire ape opened its bloody mouth, and a scarlet flame rushed up to the sky and stopped the stream of water. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Continuous sizzling sounds were produced at the intersection of the two sides. Fellow Zhang, fellow son, where are you? If you don't make a move now, when will you? Xiang Min chuckled and shouted with great confidence. As Xiang Min's voice fell, Zhang Qingguang and Sun Shangkong appeared on both sides of the fire ape. Zhang Qingguang was holding a jade bottle in his hand. It was his favorite magic treasure, the Profound Wind Bottle. Under the activation of his magic power, the Profound Wind Bottle poured out a pool of blue water light, which was directed at the fire ape's upper body. Sun Shangkong's magic treasure was the clear water pearl. It flickered with a clear water light, and under the activation of his magic power, it became a foot long and shot toward the fire ape's lower body. Roar! The fire ape was suddenly attacked by two people, and it became even more embarrassed and angry. Its left hand grabbed at the air, and a string of big fireballs immediately appeared. With a slight wave, it rushed toward the water light like a thunderbolt. With a series of rumbling sounds, the water light of the Profound Wind Bottle was scattered in all directions, and it couldn't condense for a while. At the same time, the fire ape's right leg bounced up, and a wall of fire appeared out of nowhere. The raging flames blocked the pure aqua pearl and burned fiercely. Zhang Qingguang and Sun Shangkong bitterly smiled in their hearts as they felt the true essence surging within their bodies and their magic power being absorbed by the two magic treasures. They both had a water attribute physique and were invited here by Xiang Min to confront the fire ape. Although the two of them were both at the early golden core realm like the fire ape was a natural fire beast, and its ability to control fire was far more tyrannical than a cultivator's. The strength of its fire techniques was also because of the strength of its physique that surpassed those of its peers. In addition, the fire attribute's spiritual energy within the flame forest swamp was abundant. Calm down, fellow Taoists! Xiang Min chuckled, and the water light that was rushing towards the fire ape changed again. It actually turned into specks of crystal particles and fell from the sky. As a result, the flames spewed out by the fire ape could no longer be blocked. Most of the crystal particles fell through the gaps of the flames, and the entire area around the fire ape turned into a colorful world. Great! Zhang Qingguang and Sun Shangkong felt the abundant water attribute's spiritual energy around them, and were overjoyed. As they activated the Yuan bottle and the pure aqua pearl, they continuously threw out water attribute spells. One after another, water balls crashed into the fire ape's body, and waves of water that looked weak rushed towards the fire ape's flames. Roar! The fire ape danced with joy, and it seemed that it could no longer produce fireballs as freely as before. The flames around its body were also slowly extinguished under the impact of the spells and magic treasures. The fire ape was already at a disadvantage under the pincer attack of the spell formation and spells. Roar! The fire ape's ferocious nature was stimulated under the disadvantage. It pulled its hand, and crimson flames appeared on its sharp claws. It actually tore apart the water light of the pure aqua pearl in an instant. Then, it suddenly clenched its fist and smashed the pure aqua pearl. With a bang, the pure aqua pearl was smashed a few feet away. Taking advantage of this gap, the fire ape stood up and extended its fiery claws again, rapidly stabbing towards Sun Shangkong's forehead. Hua, Sun Shangkong didn't dare to meet the fire ape head-on. He flicked his water sleeve and a misty green brilliance blocked in front of him. But still, like silk being torn apart by the flames, the fire ape directly grabbed Sun Shangkong's forehead. On Sun Shangkong's forehead, a light blue protective brilliance appeared like the clouds, trying to block the fire ape's claws. However, under the fire ape's tremendous strength, a crack actually appeared on the protective brilliance. Sun Shankong was shocked. He quickly retreated and commanded the pure aqua pearl to rush towards the fire ape again. The fire ape opened its mouth and revealed its white teeth. The strength under its fiery claws was regenerated, and it wanted to crack Sun Shankong's skull open. At this moment, the specks of crystal particles that covered the fire ape's body suddenly turned into foot-sized rocks and smashed towards the fire ape. If it was under normal circumstances, the fire ape would have been able to dodge. But now, seeing Sun Shankong's brain matter in front of it, the fire ape had the will to fight. Its other hand slashed outwards, and a wall of fire appeared in front of it again, protecting its body. Its left hand continued slashing downwards. Bang, bang, bang! The fire ape's body shook continuously. The flames protecting its body were also on the verge of being extinguished by the water light of the profound wind vase. With a tearing sound, Sun Shankong's protective brilliance was actually torn apart by the fire ape. Its sharp claws had already landed on Sun Shankong's forehead. "Fellow Taoist Xiang, save me!" Sun Shankong was shocked and called for help. As soon as Sun Shankong's voice sounded, his body swayed and suddenly disappeared. The fire ape's claws also missed. Roar! The fire ape was stunned. Just as it was about to roar, Sun Shankong appeared under it. His face was still panicked, but hatred flashed in his eyes. He circulated his magic power desperately, and the pure aqua pearl that had smashed into the fire ape's right calf suddenly shrank by several times. Like a small rock, it fell into the fire ape's protective flames. At this moment, the rock broke through the fire ape's protective flames and smashed into its calf. With a crisp cracking sound, the fire ape's solid calf bone was actually broken. The fire ape staggered and almost fell down. It couldn't help but cry out in grief. Unfortunately, when the fire ape looked around, there was no trace of the thunder beast around it. All it could see was the huge rock and the suffocating water light. At this moment, a wave of speechless dizziness inexplicably appeared in the fire ape's head. A kind of tiredness that it had never felt before also spread out from the fire ape's body and limbs. The 5 elements soul-capturing formation was indeed powerful. Roar! The fire ape was shocked. Its left and right hands blew hard on its chest. When it raised its head and let out a long howl, a fist-sized crimson inner core was spat out from its mouth. Instantly, heat and violence filled the fire ape's surroundings. The rocks that were smashing towards it, as well as countless waves of water and other objects, all gradually disappeared under the pressure of the inner core. Seeing the fire ape spit out the inner core, Zhang Qingguang and Sun Shankong were not shocked. Instead, they were overjoyed. They knew that this was the fire ape's last resort. Although they had exhausted more than half of their magic power, as long as they could persevere, the fire ape would definitely be killed. -8. Chapter 1896. The only thing they were worried about now was that Li Fengzhu, who was in the center of the water formation, was only at the early stage of foundation establishment. They didn't know how long his magic power could last. Once the 5 elements soul-capturing formation collapsed, the fire ape would definitely escape. Within the flame forest swamp, even 7 golden core stage cultivators wouldn't be able to catch up to or kill the fire ape. Attack! Sun Shankong clenched his teeth, and the pure water pearl made a turn in the air and flew toward the fire ape's inner core. Zhang Qingguang did the same. He opened his mouth, and a misty green brilliance fell on the profound wind bottle. The jade bottle suddenly expanded, and the water within the bottle shrank several times. A ray of brilliance as thick as a thumb flew out. It was the essence of the profound water, and it lingered around the fire ape's inner core. Not only was the fire ape in danger and forced to spit out its inner core, the lightning beast was in even more danger. The lightning beast was about to turn around and roar to stop the fire ape from following it. However, before it could roar, the 5-colored light screen had already enveloped it. The thunder beast was enraged. With a flap of the wings under its armpits, its body suddenly shot up and charged towards the five-colored light curtain. Moreover, the thunder beast raised its two pitch-black arms at the same time. Its 5 fingers flashed with purplish-black lightning as they stabbed into the five-colored light curtain. Rip! The lightning beast actually tore a crack in the five-colored light screen. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh! A series of sounds could be heard. Dozens or even hundreds of large fireballs leaked out from the crack and fell like raindrops, smashing towards the lightning beast's body. Roar! The lightning beast was shocked. It didn't dare to use force to tear open the crack. It flapped its wings and wanted to escape far away to avoid the fireballs. However, as the lightning beast flew, the fireballs also changed direction and continued to smash towards the lightning beast's head. Seeing that it couldn't dodge, the lightning beast stood in midair and flapped its wings and hands. Streaks of lightning formed a net and flew into the air. With a series of crackling sounds, all the fireballs were extinguished by the lightning net. However, just as the thunder beast was about to flap its wings again and fly into the air, a crimson whip that was dozens of feet long appeared in the air. It circled in the air and actually turned into dozens of small fire circles that covered the thunder beast's head. The thunder beast bared its fangs again and waved its hand. A streak of lightning appeared out of thin air. Then, with a flick of its claw, the streak of lightning turned into dozens of tiny lightning bolts and flew into the dozens of tiny fire rings. After a series of thunderous rumbles, the fire rings were all destroyed, leaving only the whip still suspended in the air. How strange! A low voice sounded. The short Lu Mingxing appeared near the long whip and sighed. You are indeed a beast born with the ability to control thunder. I can't wait. Then, he stretched out his hand and grabbed his magic treasure, the sun-chasing whip. With a shake of his magic power, a spark appeared in his hand and flew along the sun-chasing whip to the tip. Everywhere it passed, it grew larger. When the sun-chasing whip streaked across the air like a dragon and hit the lightning beast's chest, the spark was as bright as a round sun. Gee! The thunder beast seemed to have a ferocious nature. It didn't know how to dodge at all. Thrusting its 2 hands forward, it actually struck the fireball with lightning speed. A bit of purplish black appeared within the fireball, and then it suddenly exploded. Ouch! A scream sounded. Looking at Lu Mingxing again, his body was actually flickering with a layer of lightning. He fell from the sky, and the sun-chasing whip was in the lightning beast's hand with lightning lingering around it. Take this! The lightning beast flapped its wings and wanted to chase after Lu Mingxing again. However, with a roar, Jin Yi, Jiang Zhuqing, Feng Shuqing, and their disciples appeared beside it. It is indeed a rank 6 spiritual beast. Even in the 5 elements formation, it is still so powerful. Feng Shuqing's eyes flashed. He said fiercely, if it wasn't for fellow cultivator Xiang, I wouldn't have dared to face this beast. Let's attack together. Jin Yi clapped his hands, and a pitch-black ring flew into the air without the slightest flicker of light. Rumble. Another loud rumble rang out, and the giant green tree rolled toward the thunder beast from all directions with an earth-shattering momentum. Roar! The lightning beast didn't seem to be afraid. With a wave of its hand, more lightning blocked the giant green wood. Go! Jin Yi pointed with his finger. The ring flew into the giant green wood. The giant green wood blocked the ring, and the lightning beast didn't notice it. Zi la la! The lightning blocked the green wood and easily destroyed them one by one. However, when the ring suddenly appeared in the middle of the green wood, all of the lightning actually rushed into it like birds returning to their nest. This was the corroding lightning ring that Jin Yi had been searching for over 100 years. The lightning eclipse ring appeared at the perfect time. It instantly absorbed all the lightning from the lightning beast. The green wood caught the lightning beast off guard and smashed down. It unexpectedly drowned the lightning beast. Roar! The lightning beast roared angrily. Its entire body spun rapidly within the green wood. Its body was emitting lightning, and it looked like a lightning ball about 20 feet wide. Many green trees were once again crushed by the flickering lightning from the lightning ball, and were gradually annihilated. At this moment, the lightning erosion ring could only absorb the scattered lightning from the lightning ball. It could no longer absorb the lightning from the entire lightning ball. Jinye's face was filled with astonishment. He had a thunder attribute physique and understood thunder magic the most. This thunder corroding ring was something he had specially used to deal with the thunder beast. But he hadn't expected that the thunder beast would be able to break the thunder corroding ring with a simple spell. Attack! Jiang Zhucheng saw that Jinye's efforts were futile, so he tossed away the transcendent artifact, Wooden Dragon. A staff-like transcendent artifact flew into the air and transformed into a long green dragon. It shook its head and wagged its tail as it charged towards the thunder beast. Go! Feng Shuqing wasn't slow either. With a wave of her hand, she took out a jade pipa from her storage bag. She waved her hand. Although there was no sound, the sound of the pipa was already attacking the lightning beast. Jia Ming, Qian Han, and Feng Jiayu also took out their magic items and attacked the lightning beast with all their mana. In an instant, light flashed everywhere and the spiritual energy in the air was completely disrupted. Shi Yan had already flown to Lu Mingxing's side and caught Lu Mingxing, who had been knocked out by the thunder beast. He waited for Lu Mingxing to wake up before he took out his own magic tool and guarded his master's left side very cautiously. In his other hand, he held a shiny talisman. The green wood dragon charged into the lightning ball. Its 1-foot-long tail smashed into the lightning ball. With a rumbling sound, the lightning ball was scattered. Looking inside the lightning ball, the lightning beast seemed to have fainted and was in pain. It held its head with both hands and staggered. This beast is injured. Jiang Zhucheng didn't expect his wood dragon to be effective. He was overjoyed and shouted, "That's what I said! So many of our fellow Taoists died when we attacked it last time. How can it be fine?" Jinyi and the other gold core cultivators charged into the ball of lightning within a few years. As expected, they saw blood seeping out from the corner of the lightning beast's mouth. The purple lightning in the gaps between the scales on its back dimmed, and some pitch-black liquid had seeped into its back. Rumble! The lightning beast suddenly spread its wings and soared into the sky. Its 4 limbs spread out, and a series of thunderous roars came from its mouth. Pfff, the others were fine, but Feng Shuqing spat out a mouthful of blood. His body went limp to the side. The jade pipa sound was broken by the lightning beast, but Feng Shuqing was already suffering from the backlash of the sound attack. Feng Shuqing was already so heavily injured, but the lightning beast was not much better off after forcefully breaking through the invisible pipa. Azure blood gushed from its mouth as its wings trembled violently. Go, Jingyi and Jiang Zhucheng looked at each other. The lightning corroding hoop flew into the air. The wood dragon entered the hoop and rushed toward the lightning beast with it. Sizzle! The lightning beast waved its hand with some difficulty. Lightning flickered in an attempt to block the wooden dragon. However, the moment the lightning touched the lightning corroding ring, it was sucked in. The wooden dragon charged directly to the lightning beast's chest. Just as everyone's faces lit up with joy, they heard a clear whoosh. A fist-sized, purple lightning beast's inner core was spat out from the lightning beast's mouth. The purple lightning beast's inner core was faintly moving, and countless tiny lightning bolts flashed within. Bang! The inner core smashed into the wood dragon and the lightning corroding hoop. A fist-sized hole appeared on the wood dragon's body. The lightning corroding hoop also buzzed. Finally, with a crack, the lightning beast's inner core actually cracked. Ah! Jinyi and Jiang Zhucheng screamed at the same time. They both covered their hearts with their hands. Clearly, they were both injured with 2 early golden core cultivators injured. The lightning beast, who was already injured, naturally couldn't avoid it. The lightning beast opened its mouth and tried to suck back the inner core. But at that moment, a cultivator flew out from the side of the lightning beast. This cultivator's upper body had already turned into a beast. He looked like a bull, and his thick body made his Taoist robe bulge. This cultivator was Shi Yan, who used the talisman. Shi Yan's eyes were crimson red. His arm, which had swelled to twice its previous size, was wrapped around a thick blue chain. As Shi Yan approached, the chain was activated by Shi Yan's mana. Like a spirit snake, it streaked through the air and struck the thunder beast's back. There was already a lot of blood gushing out from the spot where the thunder beast was. Pa! Shurian's chain actually hit the lightning beast's back. The huge impact was obviously beyond the lightning beast's expectations. The lightning beast, who was in the middle of sucking back the inner core, staggered, and its inner core was slightly off course. However, the impact of the chain only managed to break the lightning beast's protective light, revealing its true scales. A few drops of green blood actually dripped down. Roar! The lightning beast was furious. Its wings trembled slightly, and its entire body crouched down. It quickly grabbed the chain with one hand. A string of lightning followed the chain and struck at Shurian, while its other hand quickly burned Shurian's chest. It easily tore apart Shurian's defense. Shurian was shocked. He gritted his teeth, clenched his fists, and punched the lightning beast's chest. -8. Chapter 1897. Ping. At the same time, Sala moved. When Shurian's fist struck the thunder beast, his own chest was also torn apart by the thunder beast's sharp claws. Bloody innards immediately fell from the sky. Shurian's corpse also rapidly shrunk and fell. Jin Yi and the others were shocked. In the blink of an eye, a Middle Foundation establishment cultivator was so easily killed by the thunder beast. Woo! The thunder beast let out a sorrowful cry. It held the place where Shurian had risked his life to strike with one hand. It seemed to be in great pain. Rumble! At this moment, between the thunder beast and its inner core, many stones appeared and smashed towards the thunder beast. A trace of confusion actually appeared in the thunder beast's ferocious eyes. It seemed that the 5 elements soul-capturing formation had taken effect again. Good! Let's hurry up and do it! Jin Yi was overjoyed when he saw the situation. He hurriedly said, Fellow Taoist Xiang, separate the thunder beast's inner core from the thunder beast. Just as Jin Yi said, Xiang Min was overjoyed when she saw that the 2 beasts were about to be trapped. She tried her best to urge the 5 elements soul-capturing formation and was about to increase its power again. She wanted to make a final strike before Xiaohua and Li Fengzhu's magic power was exhausted. But at this moment, a strange change occurred. The place where the unknown pressure had been produced once again produced a fierce aura that rushed straight to the sky. Around this aura, a huge amount of heaven and earth's spiritual qi of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were produced. This spiritual qi was full of blood and strangeness. As soon as it appeared, it immediately produced a huge suction force. It sucked in all the heaven and earth's spiritual qi within 100 miles. One Wang. The 5 elements soul-capturing formation actually let out a sorrowful cry. Not good! Xiang Min was shocked. Just as she was about to pour her magic power into the 5 elements plate, the 5 elements plate suddenly exploded and split into 5 pieces that entered the 5 formation eyes. Following the 5 elements plate's entry, the 5 formation eyes were immediately filled with a huge amount of 5 elements spiritual qi. Xiaohua and the others who were sitting in the formation eyes immediately began to spin. Before the 5 of them could do anything, a kind of oppressive force descended from the sky. A black and white brilliance faintly flashed. The 5 people's 5 elements plate and the 5 magic treasures all disappeared. Xiang Min and the rest were dumbfounded. Seeing the 5 elemental soul-capturing array collapse without any reason, they were really caught off guard. The fire ape and the lightning beast, who were besieged by the 7 people, suddenly rushed into the air. Each of them executed their natural superpowers and fled in the direction they came from. Where do you think you're going? How could Xiang Min, Jin Yi, and the others allow the 2 beasts to escape? With a shout, the 7 of them split into 2 groups and followed the flame and lightning beasts up the mountain range. Xiaohua! Shue said sorrowfully as she stared blankly at the empty space. Shurian's corpse was on the ground, but not a single hair of the 5 people in the eye of the formation could be seen. The sun-moon corona that Xiaohua had just used was also thrown to the side. Xiaohua actually didn't have time to put it into the space. Go! Let's catch up to Marshal Uncle Jin. Only he can help us find Xiao Hua. Seeing that the other disciples were all following their own masters, Xian Yang didn't dare to hesitate and urged Yan Qinglian. Yan Qinglian also didn't dare to delay and pulled Shui Shui. Shui Shui had no choice but to take the sun-moon corona and follow Jingyi. 100 miles away, in the underground space of the Fire Lake, Yuan Feng and the other 4 elders, as well as many disciples of the spirit husbandry sect, were dumbfounded as they looked at the 5 rotating masses of black gas and the 5 cultivators who suddenly appeared within the masses of black gas. Who else could these 5 cultivators be? Naturally, they were the 5 formation eyes of the 5 elemental soul capturing array: Xiao Hua, Li Fengzhu, Qing Hao, Zhu Ming, and Li Mian. The 5 elemental soul capturing array extracted the spiritual energy of the 5 elements nearby for its own use, and the 5 essences spirit awakening array took up even more of the spiritual energy of the 5 elements. With the power of the 5 spirits and the 4 late golden core realm cultivators, wouldn't the formation eyes of the 5 elemental soul capturing array be used by the 5 essences spirit awakening array? Xiao Hua and the others were teleported into the 5 spirit formation eyes of the 5 essences spirit awakening array. How could the 4 early foundation establishment realm cultivators resist such a short teleportation? When their figures appeared in the black gas, they were already unconscious. Only Xiao Hua, who was a Qi refinement realm cultivator, had a strong physical body. He only felt his vision darken and fainted slightly. His vision became even darker. That's right, it was like that. The figures of Xiao Hua and the others only appeared for a moment in the black gas. Yuan Feng and the others didn't even have time to see them clearly before the soaring aura and the spiritual energy of the 5 elements pressed down, completely messing up the 5 masses of black gas. Xiao Hua and the others' figures were covered by the black gas, and the 5 masses of black gas fell onto the altar and merged together. The entire altar was boiling with black gas at this moment. Bubbles of various sizes continuously bubbled out, and a blurry pattern gradually formed by the black gas became clearer and clearer. Disciples, get ready! Yuan Feng was overjoyed. He didn't care about the abnormality of Xiao Hua and the others and waved his hand as he shouted. At this moment, a bark-like sound rang out from the black gas. A sharp aura was born from the black gas. That aura was very cold and cruel. Seeing that the Chao Wu's soul essence was about to appear, Yuan Feng shouted, "Collect!" The spirit husbandry sect disciples who were already prepared opened their spirit storage bags. All kinds of strange spirit beasts flew out from their spirit storage bags. However, no matter how many spirit beasts there were, they were all suppressed by the aura. Although they didn't piss their pants in terror, they all hid behind the disciples obediently. The spirit husbandry sect disciples all activated their spirit devouring cultivation method and waited for the Chao Wu's soul essence to appear. However, time passed. Very quickly the soul essence that they were waiting for still didn't appear. Just as Yuan Feng and the other elders were as anxious as ants on a hot pan, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth began to gather on the altar in the air. On the other hand, Xiao Hua was extremely bewildered. He felt his vision go black, and when he opened his eyes again, Jingyi and the others were gone. The lightning beast was gone, and even the earth element magic treasure that was before him earlier had vanished. Naturally, the force that absorbed his magic energy had vanished as well. However, his vision was still dark. He couldn't see anything. What's going on? Xiao Hua's body floated in the black gas. He scanned with his divine sense and tried to think of a solution. Unfortunately, the black gas seemed to be very large. Perhaps it was suppressing his divine sense. Xiao Hua couldn't see anything. Just as Xiao Hua clapped his hands and wanted to use the cloud-suppressing seal, an almost irresistible pressure fell from the top of Xiao Hua's head. Xiao Hua couldn't react in time and was pushed down. This is bad! Xiao Hua didn't hesitate and immediately used the bright thunder escape. He wanted to fly up. At this moment, a barking sound was heard. Xiao Hua's body tightened and his magic power was instantly condensed. -8. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.